Hello there, and welcome to Drift to the Stars. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Wherever you are, lying down curled beneath something, warm eyes growing heavy, you arrived at exactly the right moment. This is a place with no hurry in it, no destination to reach, only a slow, gentle wandering through some of the most quietly astonishing things we know about love. Why it finds us, why it stays, why it chooses in ways we cannot always name or explain. These are not stories meant to dazzle. They are meant to settle you, to remind you that the strange, tender pull between human beings is one of the oldest mysteries in the world, and that you are part of it right now, simply by being here. And just before we begin, if these calm, curious explorations help you unwind, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, if you're ready, let's begin. There is a condition with a name that sounds almost too poetic to be medical. It is called Takotsubo syndrome, and it begins always with loss. When a person experiences a sudden, devastating heartbreak, the end of something beloved, the shock of separation, the heart can respond as though it is genuinely wounded, not metaphorically, physically. The left ventricle, the chamber that does the heaviest work, can change its shape under the flood of stress hormones that grief releases. It balloons, it weakens, it produces chest pain, shortness of breath, the sensation that something has gone terribly wrong inside the chest. Because something has. Doctors call it stress cardiomyopathy. In hospitals, it is sometimes mistaken for a heart attack. The symptoms are nearly identical. The fear is identical. And yet, the cause is not a blockage, it is sorrow. Scientists believe the surge of adrenaline and cortisol released during acute emotional loss temporarily stuns the heart muscle. The body, it seems, does not know the difference between a physical threat and an emotional one. It responds to both with the same ancient flooding alarm. When we say a heart is broken, we are not speaking only in metaphor. We are describing something the body knows before the mind has finished grieving. There are approximately 200 billion trillion stars in the observable universe. That number is so large it has no meaning the human mind can hold. But here is something stranger still. Mathematicians who study connection, the possible pairings between human beings across history, across every person who has ever lived or might yet live, suggest that the number of potential human relationships exceeds even that. Not because the math is simple, but because the variables are not. Every combination of timing, proximity, history, and attention creates a unique path. Most of those paths are never walked. The universe, vast as it is, may contain fewer stars than the number of connections that will never happen. And yet some do. Some improbable, specific, unrepeatable pairings find each other anyway. Across rooms, across years, across the silent arithmetic of chance, ancient and vast as the cosmos feels, the space between two people who have found each other is in its own way equally immeasurable, equally unlikely, equally worth pausing to consider. What found you is rarer than a star. Without any decision being made, without any instruction sent from the thinking parts of the mind, the pupil, that small dark opening at the center of the eye, grows larger in the presence of someone beloved. It is called pupil dilation, and it happens automatically governed by the autonomic nervous system, the part of us that also manages breathing and heartbeat. When the brain encounters something, it values something. It finds beautiful or safe or deeply wanted. It widens the aperture. It lets in more light, as if the body before the mind has composed a single thought, is already trying to see more clearly. In older centuries, people noticed this without understanding it. Italian women of the Renaissance would place drops of belladonna, a mildly toxic plant extract, into their eyes to dilate their pupils artificially. They believed correctly that enlarged pupils made a face more attractive. What they did not know was why. They had found the signal without finding the source. The source is older than language, older than courtship rituals. It lives in the part of us that existed before we had words for what we wanted. The eye opens, quietly, without being asked. Two people meet. They are strangers. They sit across from each other or stand in the same room, or share a few minutes of genuine, unhurried conversation. And something happens that neither of them initiates and neither of them controls. Their nervous systems begin to synchronize. This is not a feeling. It is a measurable event. Researchers studying interpersonal connection have found that during authentic conversation, not polite exchange but real listening, the physiological rhythms of two people begin to align. Heart rate variability, skin conductance, even subtle patterns of neural activity when measured show signs of coupling. The body of one person begins gently to echo the body of the other. Scientists call this physiological synchrony. It appears to be one of the earliest signs that a social bond is forming. It happens faster than either person expects, sometimes within minutes. Sometimes researchers believe even within seconds of genuine eye contact. The self, it seems, is more porous than we imagine. In the presence of another person who is truly present, the boundary between where one nervous system ends and another begins grows quietly thin. Connection is not a decision. It is something the body begins before the mind has caught up, before a single thought about attraction forms, before the mind has assembled an opinion, before the eyes have had a chance to linger. The nose has already begun its ancient wordless assessment. The human olfactory system processes scent with extraordinary speed, and some of what it detects, researchers believe, carries information that goes far deeper than preference. Embedded in the natural body scent of another person are chemical signals related to the immune system, specifically to something called the major histocompatibility complex, a cluster of genes involved in immune response. Studies have found that people tend to be more attracted to the scent of those whose immune genetics differ from their own, not dramatically, not consciously, but consistently, as if the body, through scent alone, is quietly conducting a compatibility assessment the mind will never fully access. Even you, in some moment you may not remember, may have leaned slightly closer to someone for a reason you could not name. The science is still unfolding. Researchers debate the mechanisms, but the finding keeps returning. Attraction at its root may begin not with a face, not with a voice, but with something far older. Something carried in the air between two bodies, before either one has spoken a word. The heart, it turns out, may take its first instruction from the breath. Somewhere in the cold, dark water, far beneath the surface, far from any shore, a whale is singing. Not to the water, not to the dark, to another whale perhaps thousands of miles away. The song travels through ocean basins the way light travels through space, carrying information across distances the body cannot imagine surviving. Humpback whales produce vocalizations so complex that researchers have spent decades mapping their structure and still find new patterns within them. The songs change across seasons. They evolve. They spread. One whale learns a new phrase, and within years that phrase has moved across an entire ocean population, passed from voice to voice like something precious. What is most quietly astonishing is this: the songs are sung almost exclusively during mating season. They are, in the most ancient sense, love songs, and the males who sing them do so for hours at a time, hovering nearly motionless in the dark, pouring something into the water that will travel farther than they will ever go. Scientists still debate exactly what information the songs carry and whether the intended listener always hears. But the singing continues. It has continued for longer than our species has existed. Somewhere in the deep, something is calling, and the ocean carries it forward gently into the dark. Pay attention sometime to your own voice when you are speaking to someone you love, not to the words, to the sound itself. Researchers studying vocal behavior have found that people unconsciously shift their vocal patterns in the presence of romantic partners. The pitch drops slightly, the pace slows, the volume softens to something closer to a whisper. These changes happen without instruction, without awareness. The voice is doing something the face and hands do too. It is signaling safety. It is saying, without words, I am not a threat to you. I am something closer than that. This vocal shift has been observed across cultures and across languages. It appears in new couples and in long married ones. It even appears, researchers have found, when someone is simply thinking about a person they love, speaking of them, to a stranger describing a memory. The voice gentles itself around the subject of love, the way a hand gentles itself around something fragile. There is a name for the quality this produces: prosody, the music of speech. And love, it seems, writes its own melody into the voice before the speaker has chosen a single word. The way someone says your name softly without urgency is already a kind of answer. There is a study, quiet and careful, that has become one of the more discussed findings in the psychology of human connection. A researcher named Arthur Aaron designed a protocol. Two strangers would sit across from each other and take turns answering a series of questions, 36 of them growing gradually more personal, more vulnerable, more real. After the questions, they would look into each other's eyes for 4 minutes, without speaking. 4 minutes is not very long. It is the length of a song, the time it takes to boil water. But something happens in that silence. Participants in the study consistently reported feelings of warmth, closeness, and in some cases something resembling love for a person they had met less than an hour before. The combination of genuine disclosure and sustained unguarded eye contact appears to create conditions in the brain and body that mirror the early stages of deep attachment. Aaron's research suggests that intimacy is not something that simply happens to people over years. It can, under the right conditions, be gently invited through questions asked with care and the willingness to be seen. What the study cannot explain is why. Why does the eye held for long enough open something in the chest that words alone cannot reach? That part remains beautifully, stubbornly unanswered. Some doors open only when two people stand at them together. If you placed a brain scan of someone newly in love beside a brain scan taken under certain other conditions, a neurologist reading them blind without knowing which was which would have difficulty telling them apart. The early stage of romantic love activates the brain's dopamine reward pathways, with an intensity comparable to the effect of certain powerful substances. The ventral tegmental area floods with activity. The nucleus accumbens lights up. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for calm judgment, risk assessment, long-term thinking, grows quieter. Not absent, just softer, as if stepped back. This is why new love feels the way it does, consuming, clarifying, and confusing at once. The reason a person in early love will make decisions that their ordinary, uninfluenced self might not. The reason food tastes different and sleep patterns shift, and the thought of a specific person can interrupt an otherwise ordinary afternoon, like a stone dropped into still water. The brain is not broken. It is responding to something it has assessed as profoundly important. It is allocating resources accordingly. It is doing in its ancient and chemical way exactly what it was shaped to do. Love is not a loss of reason. It is reason redirected, pointed at something the body has decided matters more than almost anything else. There is a region of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. It sits roughly near the front and center, and among its many responsibilities, it monitors pain. Physical pain, the signal from a cut, a burn, the ache of injury. It receives those signals, processes them, and contributes to the experience of suffering. It also processes loneliness. Not as a metaphor, not approximately. Loneliness in neuroimaging studies activates the anterior cingulate cortex in ways that significantly overlap with the response to physical pain. The brain at the level of its architecture does not maintain a clean distinction between the hurt of isolation and the hurt of injury. Perhaps you have felt this without knowing its name. The particular weight of an empty room. The specific ache of being surrounded by people and still feeling unreachable. That is not weakness. That is not imagination. That is a real signal, processed by a real part of you telling you something true about what you need. Human beings did not evolve to be alone. The nervous system knows this. It has always known this. And when connection is absent, it sends the same alarm it sends for any other form of harm, quietly, persistently, until something changes. You were never meant to carry everything by yourself. In the grasslands of North America, there lives a small creature that most people pass their entire lives without thinking about. The prairie vole. Unremarkable in size, unremarkable in appearance. A small rounded body, soft brown fur eyes like polished seeds. But prairie voles do something that places them among a very small fraction of all mammals on Earth. They form lifelong pair bonds, not seasonal arrangements, not convenient proximity, something closer to what we, with our larger and more complicated hearts, would recognize as devotion. When two prairie voles bond, they groom each other, sleep curled together, and raise their young side by side. If one is removed from the other, even briefly, the remaining vole shows measurable signs of anxiety. Stress hormones rise. Behavior changes. The small body registers the absence of the beloved as something wrong with the world. Researchers studying the neuroscience of this bonding found that prairie voles have an unusually high density of oxytocin and vasopressin receptors in their reward circuits. The presence of a bonded partner for these animals activates the same pathways as food, as warmth, as safety. They are not performing loyalty. They are built for it. Somewhere in the long story of life on this planet, devotion was tried, and it worked. The prairie vole carries that experiment forward quietly in the grass. Attraction, researchers have found, can form in less time than it takes to blink. Not the fullness of love, not the deep-weathered thing that builds across years of shared mornings and accumulated kindness, but the first flicker, the initial signal that something in the nervous system has registered another person as significant, that can arrive in as little as a fifth of a second, faster than a single heartbeat, faster than the conscious mind can process what the eyes have seen. This finding comes from studies using rapid image presentation faces, shown for fractions of a second, too brief for deliberate assessment. Participants consistently form impressions, and those impressions predict later judgments with surprising accuracy. The brain has already begun its evaluation before the person has had a chance to look properly. What is being assessed in that fraction of a second is not fully understood. Symmetry plays a role. Familiarity plays a role. Certain features associated with health appear to register quickly, but the full picture of what the brain is doing in that instant remains honestly unclear. What is clear is this: something in you recognizes something in another before either of you has spoken, before names are exchanged, before the air between you has had time to warm. The first moment is faster than we imagine, and quieter than we expect. Watch two people who feel genuinely close to each other, not performing closeness, actually inside it. Sit with them long enough, quietly enough, and you will notice something that neither of them is aware of. Their breathing matches. Not perfectly, not like clockwork, but in a gentle, drifting way. One inhales, and a moment later so does the other. One's chest slows, and the rhythm beside them slows too. Researchers who have studied this phenomenon call it respiratory synchrony, and they have found it emerging in couples, in close friends, in parents sitting beside their children. It is not taught. It is not decided. It happens the way tides happen through a pull that neither body is consciously exerting. Some researchers believe it is mediated by subtle visual cues, the body reading the rise and fall of another's chest, the way it reads other wordless signals. Others suggest it may involve something more diffuse, a shared attunement to the rhythm of the space between two people. What is agreed upon is this: when it happens, it is a sign of something real. The body does not synchronize its most essential rhythm with just anyone. Breathing is not performance. It is the oldest thing the body does, and it does not share that oldest thing carelessly. In the dry heat of ancient Egypt, archaeologists have found fragments of papyrus covered in hieratic script, the cursive writing of a civilization that flourished more than 3,000 years ago. Among administrative records, among medical texts and religious hymns, they found something else entirely. Love letters, not formal declarations, not ceremonial language, private, aching, specific letters from people who missed someone, who longed for someone, who could not sleep for thinking of someone. The language is translated across millennia and still lands with a familiarity that is almost startling. One fragment speaks of a beloved's face appearing in dreams. Another describes the writer's heart as something that will not stay still. 3,000 years ago, someone sat down and tried to write what could not be spoken aloud, tried to find words for the particular interior weather that another person had created in them. And the words they chose across every translation, across every century between their hand and ours, are recognizable. The longing is the same. The sleeplessness is the same. The reaching toward another across distance and silence, that is the same too. Love does not belong to our century. It is far older than we are, and it has always found a way to leave a mark. The immune system is not romantic. It is precise and pragmatic and ancient, a vast network of cells and proteins whose only concern is identifying what belongs to the body and what does not. It does not traffic in feelings. It traffics in antigens and antibodies and the slow cellular work of defense. And yet, research into the relationship between love and immune function has found something quietly remarkable. The same genetic markers that govern immune compatibility, the major histocompatibility complex those immune system genes also present in body scent, appear to influence not just who we are attracted to, but how our immune systems change in response to a long-term partner. Couples in close sustained relationships show measurable shifts in immune cell activity. Some of these shifts appear to be mirrored the immune system of one partner, changing in ways that subtly reflect the immune system of the other, as if the body over years of proximity begins to incorporate the biological presence of a beloved into its own internal landscape. Scientists are still mapping the full picture. The mechanisms are complex and not entirely settled, but the direction of the finding keeps returning to the same quiet suggestion. Loving someone over time changes the body at a level far below thought, far below feeling. You are not the same organism you were before you loved who you have loved. There are approximately 7,000 languages spoken on Earth today. Each one is a different architecture of thought, a different way of carving the world into nameable pieces, of deciding what deserves a word of its own and what must be borrowed from somewhere else. And across all of them, the word love does not translate cleanly. Not because love is absent from other languages, quite the opposite. Other languages often have more words for love than English does, more precise, more differentiated, more honest about the fact that what we call love is not one thing but many. What is missing in translation is not the feeling but the container. English asks a single four-letter word to carry everything: the love for a child, for a friend across decades, for a stranger whose face stopped you, for the quiet companionship of a long marriage, for something felt once and never again named. Other languages refuse this compression. They insist on distinction. They know that what you feel at the beginning of something is not what you feel in the middle, and that neither of those is what you feel when something is ancient and settled and so familiar it has become part of how you understand yourself. What we call love is an entire country. Most languages know this. They have drawn the internal borders. They have named the regions. English, for all its richness, is still learning its own geography. In a research building in a room designed for careful measurement, a person lies inside a brain scanner. On a screen above them, images appear. In one condition, images of strangers. In another, images of someone they love. Then a mild, calibrated pain stimulus is applied to the hand. When the stranger's face appears, the pain registers as expected. When the beloved's face appears, even a photograph, even a two-dimensional image on a screen, the reported intensity of the pain drops. The neural signatures of pain processing shift, not dramatically, but measurably, consistently. Across multiple studies, across different laboratories, the finding keeps returning. The presence of a loved one, even their image alone, even the memory of their face, changes how the body processes harm. Even now, if someone you love is somewhere in your mind tonight, a face you could picture without effort, a voice you know by heart, that presence is doing something in you. Not metaphorically. Something real, something chemical, something that your nervous system is quietly grateful for, whether or not you have thought to name it. The mind reaches toward the beloved the way a plant reaches toward light, not because it has decided to, because it was made that way. The octopus is an extraordinary creature to consider when thinking about love. It has 3 hearts. Its blood runs blue. Its arms contain 2/3 of its neurons, meaning it thinks in some sense in its limbs. It is so neurologically different from a vertebrate that studying its mind feels like studying a separate experiment in consciousness entirely. And yet, researchers studying octopus behavior have found evidence of something that looks from the outside like individual preference. Given the choice of interacting with different individuals, octopuses show consistent patterns, returning to some, avoiding others. In controlled studies, they appear to remember specific individuals and adjust their behavior accordingly. Some have shown what researchers cautiously describe as affiliative behavior, a tendency toward certain companions that goes beyond simple utility. Whether this constitutes anything like what we mean by preference, let alone affection, is genuinely uncertain. The octopus cannot tell us. Its inner life remains honestly, beautifully opaque, but the behavior keeps appearing. The returning, the remembering, the choosing of one over another, again and again for reasons the science has not yet fully mapped. Even in a mind built entirely differently from ours, something keeps pointing toward the specific, toward the particular, toward this one and not another. A marriage at its beginning is two separate rhythms sharing a space, two hearts beating at their own pace, shaped by their own histories, their own sleep patterns, their own private interior weather, two nervous systems politely coexisting. But something happens over years, something slow and quiet and not fully understood. Researchers studying long-term couples have found that partners who have spent decades together tend to show a gradual convergence in resting heart rate. Not identical, not synchronized in the way that happens during moments of emotional closeness, but drifted toward each other, as if the body, over a long shared life, has begun to take its rhythm from the one beside it. The mechanism is not entirely clear. Shared routines contribute: the same sleep schedule, the same pace of mornings, the same cadences of daily life layered over years. Emotional attunement may play a role. The simple repeated presence of another body in the same space, breathing the same air, moving through the same hours. Whatever the cause, the finding carries something worth holding. That the body, given enough time beside someone, begins to move at their frequency. That love in its long and quiet form writes itself into the body's most basic rhythm. The heart, it seems, is a patient and willing student. There is a region of the brain called the amygdala. It is ancient, present in animals far older and simpler than we are, and its primary responsibility is threat assessment. It is the part of you that notices danger before you have consciously registered it. That makes you step back from a ledge before fear has formed a thought. And it is profoundly shaped by early experience. Children who receive consistent, warm, attuned care in their earliest years, who are held when distressed, responded to when they call, made to feel that the world contains reliable sources of comfort, show measurable differences in amygdala development. The stress regulation regions of their brains grow quite literally larger, more robust, more capable of returning to calm after disruption. Affection in the earliest years is not soft or supplementary. It is structural. It builds the architecture of the nervous system that a person will carry for the rest of their life. The capacity to feel safe, the capacity to trust, the capacity to love without being overwhelmed by the vulnerability that love requires. Every child held gently in a frightened moment is having their brain quietly, permanently changed for the better. Love, from the very beginning, is construction work. There is a fear that rarely makes it onto lists. It has no dramatic reputation. It does not announce itself loudly in the body the way fear of heights does, or the way darkness frightens children who have not yet learned that the dark is mostly empty. It is called philophobia, the fear of falling in love, and it is, researchers suggest, among the most quietly common fears in the adult human population. Not a clinical rarity, not an edge case, something that moves through ordinary lives in ordinary ways. The person who keeps a little distance, who leaves before things deepen, who mistakes self-protection for self-knowledge, who has learned somewhere along the way that loving means eventually losing, and has decided somewhere below conscious reasoning that the arithmetic does not work in their favor. Philophobia does not always look like fear. It can look like independence, like high standards, like being very busy, like knowing yourself very well. The avoidance is often elegant, often unconscious, often dressed in language that sounds entirely reasonable. Underneath it, researchers find the same thing almost every time: an earlier experience of love that ended in a pain the nervous system has not forgotten. The body remembers what the mind has softened into story. To fear love is not weakness. It is the nervous system doing what nervous systems do, protecting what has already been hurt once. The difficult, tender truth is that the armor and the longing are usually the same size. On a warm evening in a meadow or a forest clearing, or beside a hive in the long golden hour before dusk, a honeybee returns from a journey. She has found something, flowers rich with nectar at a specific location in the world, and she needs to tell the others. So she dances. The waggle dance of the honeybee is one of the most studied forms of animal communication in the world. Through the angle of her movement relative to the sun, through the duration and vigor of her waggle, she encodes distance and direction with extraordinary precision. Other bees read the dance. They learn the location. They go. But here is what some researchers have quietly wondered and cannot yet answer. The dance varies not just in its informational content, but in what looks from the outside like enthusiasm. Bees returning from particularly rich food sources dance longer, faster, with what appears to be greater intensity. Whether this constitutes anything like joy, whether there is something it is like to be a bee who has found something wonderful, science honestly does not know. But the dance keeps happening, more vigorous for better flowers, longer for farther journeys, as if even in the smallest nervous system the discovery of something good is worth more than a quiet report. Even the bee, it seems, wants to share good news. In the early stages of romantic love, the brain is running on dopamine, on norepinephrine, on a neurochemical cocktail that sharpens attention toward one specific person, disrupts sleep, reduces appetite, and produces a state of focused, almost consuming preoccupation. This is the infatuation stage. Vivid, urgent, metabolically expensive, and in most relationships temporary. But beneath it, quietly building something else is happening. The brain's reward circuits are also activated during early love, in the same regions associated with achieving long-held goals. The completion of something worked toward, the arrival at something genuinely desired. Researchers scanning the brains of people newly in love found activity in areas associated not just with pleasure, but with motivation, with drive, with the particular satisfaction of reaching something that mattered, which suggests something interesting about what love might be at its root. Not just attraction, not just chemistry, but the fulfillment of a deep, ancient need so fundamental to human survival that the brain categorizes its satisfaction alongside food and shelter and the completion of hard work. To find someone, really find them, feel found by them, is not a luxury the brain experiences as such. It is a necessity. The brain responds accordingly, with the same quiet flooding relief as arriving home after a very long journey. Love, in the brain's oldest language, means you made it. There is a theory in evolutionary biology, careful and still debated but persistent, that suggests the body maintains a kind of immunological self-portrait, a detailed, constantly updated record of its own biological identity encoded in the proteins that sit on the surface of every cell. When two people are genetically compatible in a specific way, when their immune profiles complement rather than duplicate each other, the body may recognize this, not through thought, not through any conscious channel, but through the oldest sensory system available to it: smell, touch, proximity. The feeling of instant recognition of meeting someone and sensing before any evidence has accumulated that this person is somehow known may be in part the immune system delivering a verdict it reached before the mind had asked the question. Scientists are careful here. The research is real, but the interpretation remains open. Genetic compatibility is not destiny. Attraction is not reducible to biology. Human love is too layered, too historically shaped, too culturally textured to collapse into a single mechanism. And yet the feeling persists across every culture studied. The sense of already knowing, of something clicking into place, of recognition without prior meeting. Perhaps what feels like fate is partly the body saying quietly in the only language it has ever known, yes, this, something in this fits. Grief researchers, studying the neurological experience of bereavement, have found something that complicates the easy distinction between different kinds of loss. The brain does not clearly separate them. When a person loses a romantic partner, to separation, to distance, to the ordinary devastation of a relationship, ending, the neural signatures of their grief overlap significantly with the signatures of grief following death. The same regions activate. The same stress hormones flood the same pathways. The same searching behavior appears, the mind returning again and again to the absent person, checking for them, the way a tongue returns to the place where a tooth once was. Perhaps you have known this without needing a study to confirm it. The particular way a loss of love sits in the body. The mornings when the absence is freshest. The way certain songs, certain smells, certain unremarkable corners of a city can return everything at once, not as memory, but as presence, briefly before the knowledge of absence reasserts itself. The brain does not grieve less for a love that ended than for one that was taken. It grieves the same, with the same architecture, the same duration, the same slow, necessary work of learning to carry something that used to be carried differently. Loss is loss. The heart does not rank its wounds. It simply tends to all of them as carefully as it can for as long as it takes. In a forest, a real forest, old and undisturbed, where the trees have had centuries to grow into their arrangements, something is happening beneath the surface that cannot be seen from above. The trees are talking. Through networks of fungal threads woven between their roots, trees exchange chemical signals, carbon, water, and nutrients, in patterns that researchers have spent decades mapping. A tree, under stress from drought or insect damage, releases chemical warnings that travel through the network. Neighboring trees respond sometimes by producing defensive compounds of their own, sometimes by redirecting resources toward the struggling one. Suzanne Simard, a forest ecologist whose work brought this to wide attention, found that older trees, what she called mother trees, maintain particularly dense connections to younger trees around them and appear to channel disproportionate resources toward their own offspring. The network is not random. It has structure. It has something that in a human context we might call preference. Whether this constitutes care in any meaningful sense, whether there is experience behind the chemistry, science honestly cannot say. The forest does not have feelings we can measure, but the behavior keeps appearing. The exchange of resources, the chemical warning system, the directed nurturing, from older to younger. Something in the oldest living communities on Earth moves nutrients toward what needs them. Something keeps reaching quietly through the dark. Even in a forest, standing still, nothing is entirely alone. Spend enough time with someone you love, years, decades, the long accumulated stretch of a shared life, and something begins to happen to the face. Not just aging, something more specific than that. Researchers studying long-term couples have found that partners who have lived together for many years tend to show a gradual convergence in facial expression. Not in their features, the structure of the face remains its own, but in the habitual movements of the face, the lines that form from repeated expressions, the particular way the eyes crinkle, the default resting arrangement of the mouth. These small, repeated muscular patterns performed thousands of times across a shared life begin to mirror each other. The mechanism appears to be emotional contagion, the automatic unconscious tendency to mimic the expressions of those around us, which produces over years wear patterns in the same muscle groups, deepening the same lines in the same places. What this means practically is that two people who have loved each other for a long time begin very gradually to look more alike. Not because of genetics, not because of coincidence, because they have been watching each other's faces for so long that their own faces have quietly learned from them. Love, given enough time, writes itself onto the body's surface, gently, one expression at a time. as slowly as a river reshapes stone. The kiss is one of the most widespread behaviors in human culture, and it is also, for biologists and anthropologists, one of the more genuinely puzzling ones. Not every culture kisses romantically. A small number of societies studied by anthropologists do not practice lip-to-lip kissing as an expression of affection, but the majority do. The behavior appears across history, across geography, across entirely separate cultural traditions that arrived at it independently, and science has struggled to produce a single satisfying explanation for why. Several theories exist. One suggests that kissing evolved from pre-mastication, the ancient practice of passing chewed food from a parent's mouth to an infant's, a form of feeding that required the same proximity and contact. Another proposes that kissing functions as a sophisticated assessment mechanism, allowing partners to sample each other's biochemistry, immune markers, hormonal state, signs of health at very close range. A third simply notes that the lips contain an extraordinary density of nerve endings and that their stimulation produces measurable neurochemical responses. None of these theories fully satisfies. Each explains something and leaves something unexplained. What remains after all the theories is the simple, persistent fact across most of the world, across most of recorded history. When two people love each other, they bring their faces very close together and stay there for a moment. The reason keeps escaping us. The behavior keeps happening anyway. Memory researchers have known for some time that not all memories are stored equally. The brain does not treat every experience as equally worth preserving. It prioritizes. It encodes deeply what it assesses as significant, and it lets the merely ordinary blur and fade. Memories associated with love are stored differently. They are more vivid, more durable, more resistant to the ordinary forgetting that smooths the edges of most experience over time. Neuroscientists believe this is because romantic and deeply emotional experiences trigger heightened activity in the amygdala, that ancient threat and significance assessment region, which in turn strengthens the consolidation of memory in the hippocampus. The brain, in the presence of love, essentially stamps the experience. This matters. Keep this. Do not let this go. This is why certain memories from the early period of a love affair can feel decades later almost unnervingly vivid. The specific quality of light on a particular afternoon, the exact arrangement of words in a specific conversation, the way a laugh sounded in a room you have not been inside for years. The brain decided in the moment that these things were worth keeping, and it kept them. Even time, which softens almost everything, is more careful with what love touched. Late at night in forests and meadows across North America and parts of Europe, a small bird is singing, not performing, not defending territory, not signaling to rivals, simply practicing. Young songbirds, many species but some more than others, rehearse their songs alone and in darkness, running through variations and phrases in a soft exploratory murmur called subsong. It is quieter than their full voice, tentative, sometimes almost inaudible. They are not yet ready to broadcast what they are learning. They are working something out privately in the dark. The songs they are practicing are the mating calls they will eventually use, the vocalizations through which they will, in their season, make themselves known to a potential partner. They are preparing in the quiet hours for the moment when it will matter. There is something in this that is difficult not to find moving, even accounting for the full biological distance between a bird's experience and our own. The rehearsal in darkness, the private working through of something that will one day be offered to another, the long preparation for a moment of genuine vulnerability. Love in its way also requires rehearsal, not of words necessarily, but of the capacity to be known, to offer the voice fully, to sing when the time comes without holding back. The bird practices, quietly, in the dark. For a listener it has not yet met. In laboratories studying attraction, researchers have tested many variables: symmetry, familiarity, vocal pitch, scent, and again, across different populations, different cultures, different experimental designs, one finding keeps returning with quiet consistency. The color red. People rated as more attractive when wearing red. Photographs judged more favorably when bordered in red. Faces assessed as more appealing, more desirable, more worth approaching when red is present somewhere in the visual field. The effect appears in studies conducted across North America, Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa. It appears in both men and women, though the magnitude varies. It appears even when participants are explicitly told about the study's interest in color and still cannot fully correct for it. The leading explanation reaches back further than fashion. In many primate species, reddening of the skin signals hormonal readiness, health, reproductive fitness. Humans retained somewhere in the ancient layers of visual processing a sensitivity to this signal, even when it appears on a piece of clothing rather than skin. The brain, reading red, responds to something it was shaped to notice long before anyone chose it as a color for roses or hearts or valentines. What is quietly remarkable is not that the color influences us. It is that it does so without our awareness or permission. The ancient signal arrives before the modern mind has had a chance to weigh in. The eye is older than the opinion it forms. There is a distinction in neuroscience between two kinds of love that feel from the inside like points on the same continuum, but are in the brain handled quite differently. Passionate love and compassionate love. Passionate love, the consuming, urgent, early kind, activates the dopamine-rich reward circuits. It is bright and metabolically expensive and associated with the specific regions that light up for novelty, for anticipation, for the pleasure of wanting. Compassionate love, the quieter, steadier kind that builds across years of genuine care and mutual knowledge, activates something different. The regions associated with attachment, with calm, with the particular neural signature of feeling safe. Less urgency, less heat, but more stability, more depth, more resemblance in its neural fingerprint to the feeling of being at rest in a place you trust completely. Researchers have found that long-term couples who report high relationship satisfaction show activity patterns closer to the compassionate profile, but with something additional. The reward circuits are still present, still active, just slower, less feverish, more like the warmth of a fire that has been burning long enough to produce steady heat rather than spectacular flame. The brain does not stop loving over time. It learns a different frequency, quieter, more durable, like light that has traveled a very long way and is still somehow warm when it arrives. There is a phenomenon studied carefully, replicated across multiple research groups, that sounds almost too tender to be physiological. During moments of genuine emotional closeness between romantic partners, the heart rates of two people can synchronize. Not metaphorically, not approximately. Measurably in controlled conditions, the cardiac rhythms of two people who love each other and are experiencing that love, actively touching, making eye contact, or simply sitting in a shared moment of emotional presence, begin to align. Even now, if someone you love is near you tonight, or if you are holding them gently in memory, something in your chest may already be reaching toward that rhythm. Not because you have decided to, because the body in the presence of deep attachment does not entirely know where it ends and the beloved begins. The research suggests this synchrony is mediated by the autonomic nervous system, that the shared attunement of two people who know each other well extends below conscious control into the body's most basic regulatory functions: breathing, heart rate, the quiet background operations of a body at rest. Two separate hearts, given enough love and enough time, begin to keep a common time. Not because love is a metaphor for union, but because, in some measurable and physiological sense, union is what love is actually doing, one heartbeat at a time. Dolphins are not simple animals. Their brains are large, densely folded, and contain structures associated with complex social cognition. They live in communities with remembered histories, long-term relationships, and social hierarchies that shift and reform across years. They have names for each other, signature whistles unique to each individual, used specifically to address one another. And they comfort each other. Researchers observing dolphin groups have documented behavior following social conflict disputes over resources, aggressive encounters, disruptions to the group's social order where uninvolved dolphins approach the distressed animal. They swim close, they touch, they produce vocalizations directed specifically at the individual showing signs of agitation. Whether this constitutes empathy in the full philosophical sense, whether there is genuine other-directed concern behind the behavior science, remains carefully uncertain. But the behavior itself is not uncertain. It is observed, documented, and consistent. After conflict, dolphins reach toward the one who was hurt. They do not always wait to be asked. They simply notice and move closer. There is something in this worth holding for a moment. The reaching, the moving toward rather than away. The instinct that says something near me is distressed, and my response is to be nearer still. It may be the oldest definition of care that exists, and it appears quietly in minds very different from our own. The butterflies in the stomach are real. They are just not butterflies. When the nervous system encounters something it has assessed as significant a person, it is drawn to a moment of anticipation before something important, the seconds before a conversation that matters. It activates the fight or flight response. Adrenaline is released. The heart accelerates. Blood is redirected from the digestive system toward the large muscle groups, the legs, the arms, the systems most useful for moving quickly. The stomach, suddenly receiving less blood than usual, responds with a sensation of hollowness, of fluttering movement, of something light and slightly unstable where there was previously nothing particularly notable at all. The body is preparing, not for danger exactly, though the systems involved are the same. It is preparing for something it has assessed as requiring full attention, full resource allocation, something it does not want to be caught unprepared for. This is why attraction can feel in the body so similar to mild fear, because the physiological mechanisms involved are genuinely related. The same cascade, the same hollowness, the same heightened attentive readiness. The butterflies are the body taking someone seriously. They are the nervous system's way of saying this matters, pay attention, be here fully for whatever comes next. In the ancient city of Nippur, in what is now southern Iraq, archaeologists working through layers of compacted earth found a clay tablet. It was small enough to hold in 2 hands. Its surface was covered in cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script of Mesopotamia, pressed into wet clay and then baked hard by time and circumstance into something nearly permanent. The tablet dates to approximately 2000 BCE, and what is written on it is a marriage vow. Not a legal contract, not a property arrangement, though those existed too in other documents. This was something else, language directed at a specific person about a specific feeling. Researchers translating it found words for tenderness, for the particular sweetness of the beloved's presence, for the wish that what existed between these two people would continue, would endure, would not be taken by time or circumstance, or the ordinary erosion that wears things down. 4,000 years ago, someone pressed those words into clay, perhaps at night, perhaps with some care for the shape of the letters, wanting the thing to look as right as it felt, and then it was kept, carried, eventually buried with whatever else mattered enough to preserve. It survived. Across 40 centuries of human upheaval and ruin, it survived. Some things are pressed into a person the same way, deep enough that even time cannot fully smooth them. The words someone said once in a voice that has since grown quiet. The precise weight of a hand, what it felt like to be known. Even clay remembers what was important. 2 people are talking, not exchanging information, genuinely talking. The kind of conversation that loses track of time, that moves without agenda, that finds its own direction the way water finds its own level. At some point, without either of them planning it, something happens. They laugh at the same moment. Not politely, not because laughter is expected, because something was genuinely, spontaneously funny to both of them simultaneously, because their minds arrived at the same place through the same path, and the recognition of that arrival produced the physical release of shared laughter. Researchers studying social bonding have found that laughter shared between 2 people creates a stronger sense of connection than nearly any other social behavior, stronger specifically than compliments which require only that one person think well of another. Shared laughter requires something more mutual. Both minds must arrive at the same understanding. Both nervous systems must respond in the same direction at the same moment. It is, in its way, a small act of synchrony, a moment of genuine cognitive overlap of two separate inner worlds briefly occupying the same point. Studies have found that couples who laugh together more frequently report higher relationship satisfaction, more resilience during conflict, and greater longevity as a pair. Not because laughter is a cure for difficulty, but because the capacity for it means something real is present, something that can still find lightness, something that has not yet turned entirely serious, with the weight of being close. Shared laughter is the mind saying, "I found the same thing as you. I was in the same place." The human face is the most expressive surface on Earth, not because of its size, not because of its pigmentation or its symmetry, but because of what moves beneath it. 43 muscles, many of them among the most finely controlled in the body, capable of producing combinations so numerous that researchers studying facial expression have catalogued over 10,000 distinct configurations. 10,000. More than most people will ever consciously learn to identify. More than most language can precisely name. Paul Ekman, the psychologist who spent decades mapping facial expression across cultures, found that a subset of these expressions, fear, joy, sadness, disgust, anger, surprise, contempt, appear universally, recognized by isolated peoples who had never seen outside media, produced spontaneously by people blind from birth who had never observed a face. The expressions are not learned. They are issued from somewhere older than learning. But what Ekman also found more quietly was the micro-expression of facial movement lasting less than a fifth of a second too fast for conscious control that reveals the genuine emotion beneath whatever the face is currently performing for. The social world. The face, in other words, always tells the truth. It simply tells it quickly in the spaces between the expressions we choose. Love shows up in the micro-expressions before the face has decided to show it. Brief, involuntary, honest. There and gone before the mind has approved the disclosure. The face is always slightly ahead of its owner. There is a reason why in every tradition of sleep advice, sleeping beside someone you trust is described not just as comforting, but as genuinely restorative. The reason is not sentimental. It is physiological. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, follows a daily rhythm. It rises in the early morning to facilitate waking, and it drops through the night to allow the deep restorative phases of sleep. When the cortisol cycle is disrupted, when the nervous system cannot fully settle, cannot assess its environment as safe, the quality of sleep degrades. The body rests but does not fully recover. Sleeping beside someone you love, someone the nervous system has assessed as safe, helps regulate this cycle. Cortisol levels through the night are measurably lower in people who share sleep with a trusted partner than in those sleeping alone. The nervous system in the presence of the beloved can release the vigilance it otherwise maintains. It can afford to go deeper. Even now, if you are lying beside someone tonight, or if you have ever known what it is to sleep truly well in the presence of another, that is not coincidence. That is your nervous system doing something it was shaped to do in the presence of safety. The body sleeps differently when it is not alone, more completely, more willingly, as if it has been given permission, finally, to let the night be only the night. Somewhere off the coast of a remote island, a pair of albatrosses is engaged in a ritual that has been ongoing in variations for several years. The albatross mates for life, but it does not choose its mate quickly. Courtship in the wandering albatross, one of the largest seabirds on Earth, capable of flying 40,000 miles in a single year without returning to land, can last several years. Young albatrosses returning to their breeding colonies practice courtship dances with multiple potential partners. The dances are elaborate, coordinated head movements, bill clapping, wing spreading, synchronized calls. They are practiced and refined across multiple seasons. A pair must develop their own specific shared vocabulary of movement, a dance that belongs only to them, built through repetition and adjustment, and the gradual learning of another's rhythms. Only once the dance is truly shared, fluent, mutual, specific, does the pair commit. Biologists studying albatross pairs have found that once bonded, the birds show behavioral signs of distress during separation and behavioral signs of reunion that look from the outside unmistakably like relief. They spent years learning each other's language before deciding it was the right one. There are slower ways to choose, and some of them turn out to be the most reliable. There is a study that asked participants to do something simple, to hold a piece of clothing belonging to someone they loved, a shirt, a sweater, something worn and unwashed, carrying the natural scent of a familiar person, and simply breathe. The results were measurable within minutes. Cortisol levels dropped. Self-reported anxiety decreased. The physiological markers of stress, the subtle tension that the body carries through ordinary waking hours, the background hum of a nervous system doing its constant work of assessment, softened. Not dramatically, but consistently across participants, across repetitions of the study. The scent of a loved one processed through the olfactory system and routed almost directly to the limbic regions of the brain, the ancient emotional core, the part that handles memory and threat and comfort, appears to carry information the nervous system recognizes as safe, as known, as the biological equivalent of, "You are not alone and you are not in danger." What is quietly remarkable is the specificity of the effect. Clothing from a stranger produced no such response. Clothing from a pleasant-smelling but unknown person produced no such response. The calming effect was specific to the scent of someone to whom the participant was genuinely attached. The body knows its people by smell. It has always known. Long before language gave us ways to say, "I love you," the nose was already doing its wordless version of the same thing. You carry the people you love with you in ways you cannot always see. Researchers studying love songs across cultures, working with musicologists, anthropologists, and recordings gathered from societies as different as the Andean highlands and sub-Saharan Africa and the islands of the Pacific found something they had not entirely expected. The songs sounded different. Of course they did. Different instruments, different scales, different vocal traditions, different languages carrying entirely different phonetic textures. And yet when listeners, participants who had no familiarity with the musical tradition being played, were asked simply to categorize what they heard, something kept emerging. Across cultures, love songs share a cluster of acoustic features. They tend to be slower than dance songs. They tend to sit in a higher vocal register. They tend towards smoothness rather than rhythmic complexity. They tend towards softness of production, the voice pulled back from its full power into something more intimate, more careful, as if the singer is aware of the distance between mouth and ear and is trying to cross it gently. Listeners, even unfamiliar ones, recognized these features. They identified love songs as love songs at rates significantly above chance, even when they understood nothing of the words. The music of love, it seems, speaks before the language does. Its acoustic shape is older than any particular tradition. Something in its tempo, its softness, its careful register says the same thing in every tongue. This is for you. I am close. I mean no harm. A newborn cannot see clearly. The visual system at birth is still developing, blurry at distance, sensitive primarily to high contrast and movement, not yet capable of the detailed resolution that will come in weeks and months. The world to a newborn is largely a soft and shifting blur of light and shadow. And yet, within hours of birth, in some studies within the first hour, newborns show a measurable preference for the face of their primary caregiver. Given a choice between two images or two faces, they orient more frequently, gaze longer, show more settled behavior in the direction of the person who has been present since before they could see anything at all. They recognize a face they have never properly seen, through voice, through scent, through the rhythm of a heartbeat, heard for 9 months from the inside, through every channel available to them before vision had fully opened. They have already built a representation of the beloved. And when the face finally arrives in their blurry field of view, something in them knows it. This is the first love the human nervous system forms. Before language, before memory as we recognize it, before any conscious decision has been possible. The very first thing a human being does upon arriving in the world is look for a specific face. We have been looking for each other from the very beginning. There is a particular quality to the ache of missing someone. Not the grief of permanent loss, but the specific daily weight of distance, of loving someone who is somewhere else reachable but not present known, but temporarily inaccessible. Neuroscientists studying this experience have found that the brain processes the absence of a loved one using some of the same circuits it uses to process physical hunger. The same regions, the same quality of wanting directed at a specific known thing that the body is certain exists and is simply not here. This is why missing someone feels in the body like a kind of reaching, like an appetite without an object, like the stomach's awareness of emptiness, not painful exactly, but present, insistent, returning at unexpected moments with the particular persistence of something the body knows it needs. Even as you rest right now, if there is someone you are missing, someone whose absence has a shape in your life, a specific contour in your daily hours, that feeling is not weakness, it is the body being accurate. It is appetite doing what appetite does, naming what is wanted, keeping it named, making sure you do not forget to want it. The hunger for a specific person is one of the most honest things the body does. It does not embellish, it does not perform. It simply registers the absence of something it considers necessary, and it keeps registering patiently until the person returns. In the dry, open landscapes of eastern and southern Africa, in the places where the grass grows tall and the seasons arrange themselves into wet and dry, with ancient regularity, elephants move. They move in groups, led by the eldest females whose memory of water sources and safe passages and social histories spans decades. They communicate through infrasound vibrations too low for human ears, that travel through the ground itself, felt as much as heard, carrying information across miles of open terrain. And they remember their dead. When an elephant encounters the bones of a deceased elephant, particularly the skull and tusks, which appear to carry special significance, it stops. It reaches out with its trunk and touches the bones carefully. It stands for a time that has no obvious utility. Other members of the group do the same, taking turns at the bones, touching them slowly, remaining in what researchers can only describe as a kind of attendance. This behavior is not observed with the bones of other species. It is specific to elephants. Something in these animals recognizes and responds to the remains of its own kind, with a behavior that has no survival function, researchers have been able to identify. If you have ever stood at a grave, or held an object that belonged to someone gone, or found yourself unable to simply walk past a place that was once shared, you may already understand in some wordless way what the elephant is doing. Remembering, it turns out, is not only human, and love in its long aftermath leaves marks that even the largest animals on Earth feel compelled to honor. 20 seconds is not very long. It is the time it takes to read a short sentence twice, to walk across a small room, to watch a cloud move a little way across a sky that is otherwise still. It is also, researchers have found, the minimum duration of an embrace required to trigger a meaningful release of oxytocin, the neuropeptide associated with bonding trust, and the particular quality of warmth that comes from being close to someone safe. Oxytocin is sometimes called the bonding hormone, though that name understates its complexity. It does not simply produce warmth. It reduces cortisol. It lowers blood pressure. It increases the pain threshold. It enhances the feeling of trust toward the person one is with. It promotes what researchers describe as prosocial behavior, the tendency to be generous, attentive, and kind toward others. All of this, or the beginning of all of this, from 20 seconds of being held. Not a long embrace, not a dramatic one, simply two people staying close long enough for the body to receive what it was waiting for, long enough for the nervous system to shift from its ordinary vigilance into something softer, long enough for the chemistry of connection to do its quiet, ancient work. The body was designed to be held. This is not a sentimental claim. It is a physiological one. The mechanisms are in place, waiting. They have always been waiting. The body keeps the door open patiently for the 20 seconds that change everything. There is a phenomenon in long-term relationships so common that couples themselves often do not notice it. It surfaces in conversation, in the finishing of each other's sentences, in the way one person reaches for the word the other was already forming. Researchers initially wondered whether this was simply habit, pattern recognition, two people who have had enough conversations to predict each other's linguistic choices, the way a reader predicts the next word in a familiar sentence. But the neuroscience suggests something more interesting. Brain imaging studies of long-term couples show that the neural activity of partners when observed separately during the same task shows significant overlap. The patterns of activation, which regions engage in what sequence with what emphasis, begin to resemble each other across years of genuine closeness. Not because the brains have become identical, but because sustained, attentive relationship appears to create something like a shared cognitive style, a common way of moving through certain kinds of problems, a mutual groove worn into the neural landscape by years of thinking alongside someone. When two people who love each other finish each other's sentences, they are not guessing. They are arriving at the same place through what have become, over time, genuinely similar paths. The mind, given enough love and enough time, does not stay entirely its own. It grows quietly toward the mind beside it, not losing itself, just expanding in that direction, just becoming, in some small and real way, partly shaped by the presence of another. Every human culture on Earth, without a single documented exception, has a concept of romantic love. Not the same rituals, not the same rules about who may love whom, not the same language, the same poetry, the same expression, but the underlying concept, the specific, preferential, sometimes overwhelming attachment to a particular other person that disrupts ordinary functioning and reorganizes priorities around the beloved. This appears everywhere. In hunter-gatherer societies, in agricultural civilizations, in isolated island communities, in societies with arranged marriage, in societies with complete freedom of choice, in every social structure that has been studied with sufficient care. Anthropologist Helen Fisher, who spent decades researching this question across cultures, concluded that romantic love is not a product of Western literature or modern individualism or any particular cultural moment. It is a human universal, as consistent across our species as laughter, as grief, as the preference for sweet over bitter. The implication is significant. Love in its romantic form is not something culture invented. Culture shaped it, decorated it, regulated it, celebrated and suppressed it in varying proportions. But the underlying capacity, the particular vulnerability of the human heart to one specific person was already there, already present, waiting in the species long before any particular society developed the language to describe it. Every human being who has ever lived has carried this capacity inside them. You are not unusual for having it. You are entirely, precisely, recognizably human. A study, careful and a little melancholy in its subject, examined the physical effects of heartbreak on handwriting. Participants who had recently experienced significant romantic loss were asked to produce writing samples. These samples were then analyzed, not for content, not for what the words said, but for the physical qualities of the writing itself. The pressure of the pen against the page, the size of the letters, the slant, the consistency of spacing, the regularity of the baseline. The differences compared to a control group were measurable. Those in the acute phase of heartbreak applied more variable pressure, sometimes pressing harder, sometimes barely touching the page. Letter size increased on average. The baseline, the invisible line along which letters sit, became less regular, more wandering. Handwriting is controlled by fine motor systems that are sensitive to emotional state. The body's interior weather expresses itself through the hand. A grieving nervous system does not hold a pen the same way a settled one does. The loss writes itself into the writing involuntarily, before the person has chosen a single word. We speak of wearing grief, of carrying it, of being marked by loss. Handwriting researchers have found that this is not only metaphor. The mark appears in the most ordinary gestures. In the simple act of the hand moving across a page, trying to say something, leaving more than it intended. The body tells the truth, even when the person is trying to write about something else entirely. In the forests of the southeastern United States on warm summer nights in late spring, something happens that stops people in their tracks and keeps them standing in the dark long past the time they meant to go inside. The fireflies synchronize. In certain species, particularly Photinus carolinus, studied in the Great Smoky Mountains, the males do not blink at random. They blink together. A field of individual light sources, each one a separate small creature moving independently through the dark, producing flashes that are not coordinated by any central signal, not directed by any leader, governed only by each firefly's response to the flashes of those immediately around it. And yet synchrony emerges, waves of light moving through the forest in coordinated pulses, thousands of separate organisms each following only local rules, producing something that looks from the edge of the forest like the dark itself has learned to breathe. Scientists understand the mechanism, a kind of distributed self-organizing system, where each individual adjusts its rhythm in response to its neighbors. The mathematics of it are elegant. The visual experience of it is something else entirely. Standing at the edge of such a forest, watching the dark fill and empty with synchronized light, a person cannot help but feel, in whatever wordless place such feelings live, that coordination, the coming into rhythm of separate things, is one of the most ancient impulses in the living world. Even light, given enough company, learns to beat in time. There is a finding in the psychology of love that sounds at first almost too simple to be interesting, and then considered for a moment longer becomes quietly remarkable. People in love perceive the physical distance between themselves and their beloved as shorter than it actually is. Not dramatically shorter, not in a way that causes them to misjudge the room or miscalculate a journey, but measurably consistently in controlled experimental conditions. When asked to estimate the distance between themselves and a photograph or representation of someone they love, compared to a neutral person compared to an acquaintance, people in love place the beloved spatially closer. They experience the world as if love has gently compressed the geography between two people. Researchers believe this is related to the motivational systems involved in attachment. The brain, strongly oriented towards something it values and wants to be near, appears to represent that thing as closer, as if the pull of desire is expressed not just emotionally, but spatially encoded into the very map the mind makes of the world around it. Even now, if there is someone you love who is somewhere else tonight, in another room, another city, another country, another life, they are in some quiet and neurologically real sense closer to you than the miles suggest. Your brain has been quietly adjusting the distance, pulling the map gently inward, keeping what it loves within a range it can bear. Love, it turns out, rewrites the geometry of the world, not by changing the distances, by changing the mind that measures them. The immune system does not forgive easily. It is a precise and long-memoried system, capable of holding records of past encounters with pathogens for decades, capable of mounting faster and stronger responses to threats it has seen before. It is in its way one of the most accurate record keepers in the body, and it is sensitive to the quality of close relationships. Studies examining couples over extended periods have found that those whose relationships are characterized by frequent contempt, the particular emotional tone that conveys disgust, dismissal, the sense that the other person is beneath taking, seriously show measurably faster deterioration in immune function over time, not from any single argument, from the sustained, chronic physiological stress that contempt produces in the body of both the person expressing it and the person receiving it. Couples who argue with care, who disagree with frustration or even anger, but without contempt, who maintain beneath the conflict a basic respect for the person they are fighting with, do not show the same pattern of immune decline. The body is listening to how love is practiced, not just whether it is present. It is taking notes on the quality of what passes between two people in the ordinary, unglamorous hours of a shared life. It responds to contempt as to a chronic toxin, and it responds to care, even imperfect, conflict-filled, frustrated care, as to something that does not harm. Love, at its most protective, is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of respect, inside the difficulty. There are languages that contain words for which no English equivalent exists, words that name emotional experiences so specific, so precisely observed, that their absence from other languages feels like a small gap in what can be said. The Portuguese have saudade, a word for the bittersweet ache of longing for something beloved and absent. The Japanese have koi no yokan, not love at first sight, but the sense upon meeting someone that falling in love with them is inevitable. The Georgian language has shemo medjamo, a word for eating past fullness, because the food was too good to stop, which is perhaps not about love but shares its logic exactly. And then there are the words scattered across multiple languages for the specific pain of loving someone far away. The particular variety of longing that is not grief because the person exists, is reachable, will perhaps return but is simply presently not here. Some languages compress this entire emotional landscape into a single word. They decided this experience was common enough, specific enough, human enough to deserve its own name. They were right. The experience is all of these things. There is something comforting in knowing that the feeling has a name somewhere, even if not in your own language, that someone in some place noticed it precisely enough to press it into a word and hand it forward through time. That the ache of loving across distance has been felt by enough people for long enough that it earned a place in the dictionary. You are not the first to feel this. You will not be the last. The word was already waiting. The oldest love poem ever found was written on a clay tablet in ancient Sumer, in what is now southern Iraq, and dates to somewhere around 2000 BCE. It was composed not by a soldier or a king, but by a woman, a priestess serving in the temple of the goddess Inanna. Her name has not survived, but her words have. The poem is a hymn of devotion, elaborate, sensory-specific in its imagery. It speaks of a beloved's physical presence with a directness that 4,000 years have not blunted, of sweetness, of wanting, of the particular quality of someone's company that makes ordinary time feel altered. What moves researchers who study it is not its antiquity alone. It is its familiarity. The emotional architecture of the poem, the way it moves from longing to presence to gratitude, is recognizable to anyone who has ever felt what it describes. The priestess of Inanna was not writing in a foreign emotional language. She was writing in the same one. 4,000 years ago, a woman sat down to write about love. She chose specific words. She arranged them with care. She wanted to capture something she was afraid of, losing the precise texture of a feeling at its fullest. And she did. The tablet cracked. The city fell. The civilization that produced it passed into layers of earth and time. And the poem survived, carrying her unnamed feeling forward into a world she could not have imagined to be read by people she could not have foreseen. Love writes things down, and some of what it writes outlasts everything else. Researchers studying walking behavior in romantic couples have made an observation so quiet it is easy to overlook, and so consistent it is difficult to dismiss. When two people who are romantically involved walk together, they synchronize their pace, not because one decides to match the other, not because they discuss speed or stride, but because something in the nervous system attuned to the person beside it begins automatically to adjust. The stride length converges, the rhythm aligns. Within the first few minutes of walking side by side, two separate bodies have found a common tempo. This happens more strongly in romantic couples than in pairs of friends, and more strongly in friends than in strangers. The degree of synchronization correlates, researchers have found, with the degree of emotional closeness. The closer two people are, the faster and more completely their bodies find a shared rhythm on the move. There is something in this finding worth sitting with quietly. That love expresses itself not just in grand gestures or spoken declarations, but in the body's most ordinary motions, in the pace of an afternoon walk, in the small, unconscious negotiation of two nervous systems trying to move through the same world at the same speed. Two people who love each other walk differently together than they walk alone. Their bodies know this, even when their minds are busy thinking about other things. The body is always quietly composing its own love letter. In the cold forests of North America and Europe, wolves move in family groups, that biologists have spent decades studying with increasing care and increasing respect for their complexity. The social bonds within a wolf pack are not simple dominance hierarchies as was once believed. They are family relationships with all the nuance, the history, the specific and irreplaceable nature of family that implies. Wolves form pair bonds. The bonded pair, the breeding male and female, at the center of a pack, show consistent behavioral signs of preference for each other. They travel close together. They initiate physical contact more frequently with each other than with other pack members. They coordinate decisions in ways that suggest genuine mutual attention. And when a bonded partner is lost to injury, to illness, to the ordinary dangers of a life lived in the open, the remaining wolf shows behavioral changes that researchers describe carefully but consistently. Reduced movement, reduced eating, altered sleep patterns, increased vocalization toward the area where the partner was last present. The behavior lasts for weeks, sometimes longer. Whether this constitutes grief in the full sense, whether there is genuine subjective suffering behind the behavior, science cannot say with certainty. The wolf cannot tell us. But the body of the wolf tells us something. It tells us that the absence of the specific known beloved one registers as a change in the world significant enough to alter everything else. The wolf calls into the dark. Not for any wolf, for that one. For the particular voice that would have answered. There is a region of the brain, small, buried deep, involved in many things, that responds to something so specific it took researchers some time to identify the stimulus precisely. Your own name spoken in the voice of someone who loves you. Not your name spoken by a stranger. Not your name read from a list or announced in a waiting room or called across a parking lot by someone who merely needs your attention. Your name in the particular vocal quality of someone for whom you are not interchangeable with anyone else, someone for whom your name carries weight, carries history, carries the accumulated meaning of knowing you specifically. Brain imaging studies have found that this stimulus, the beloved's voice saying the subject's own name, activates regions associated with self-referential processing, with emotional memory, with the neural representation of personal identity itself. It lights up researchers' note in a way that generic name-calling does not, which is to say you exist differently in the voice of someone who loves you. Your name in that voice is not merely a label. It is a small, complete act of recognition. It says, I know who you are, not in general, specifically, irreplaceably. I know that it is you. There is no lonelier sound than your own name spoken by someone who does not mean it. And no more anchoring sound than your name in the voice of someone who does. The difference the brain suggests is not subtle. It reaches all the way down to the question of who you are. Across every human culture that has been studied across time, across geography, across every social arrangement that human beings have devised for living together, one impulse appears with such regularity that researchers have proposed it as a human universal. The desire to protect someone you love from pain. Not the desire to be protected, not the self-preserving instinct that is shared with nearly every living thing. The other directed impulse, the wish sometimes urgent and sometimes quiet but always present to stand between a beloved person and whatever threatens them, to absorb, if possible, what would otherwise land on them. Parents show this most visibly, in ways that override even self-preservation. But it appears in romantic love too, and in deep friendship, and in the particular fierceness with which people defend those they have chosen as their own. It appears in the small daily form of holding an umbrella over someone else's head while your own shoulder gets wet. In the larger form of difficult honesty delivered at cost to oneself because the beloved deserves it. Researchers studying altruism have found that the presence of a specific named beloved person dramatically increases self-sacrificing behavior far more than the presence of an abstract group or a general moral principle. We do not sacrifice easily for humanity. We sacrifice readily, often without calculation for the particular human who is ours. Love does not make people selfless in general. It makes them fiercely, specifically, almost alarmingly selfless toward one person. And that specificity, that fierce precision of care directed at exactly one irreplaceable someone, may be one of the most powerful forces the human nervous system is capable of generating. In study after study, examining what sustains relationships across decades, what distinguishes the couples who grow closer over time from those who gradually drift apart, one variable keeps surfacing: not compatibility, not shared interests, not the absence of conflict, gratitude expressed aloud. Couples who regularly verbalize appreciation toward each other, not grand declarations but small specific acknowledgments of ordinary things, consistently report higher relationship satisfaction, greater resilience during difficult periods, and a stronger sense of being genuinely known by their partner. The mechanism appears to involve something more than politeness. When a person receives specific, genuine gratitude from a partner, not "you're great, but I noticed that you did this particular thing, and it mattered to me," the brain registers not only positive affect, but a sense of visibility, of being seen in the details, of being someone whose small efforts are worth noticing. This visibility, the felt experience of being genuinely observed by someone who cares, appears to be one of the most sustaining things a long relationship can offer. More sustaining, researchers suggest, than passion, more sustaining than excitement, because it is available every day in ordinary moments without requiring anything extraordinary. It requires only the willingness to look at the person beside you and say, simply and specifically, "I see what you are doing. I see that it costs you something, and I am not taking it quietly for granted." There is a photograph widely circulated, originally taken by a wildlife photographer, of two sea otters floating on their backs in calm water, side by side, their paws loosely linked between them. They are asleep, they are drifting, and they are holding hands. Sea otters sleep on the surface of the water. They wrap themselves in kelp to keep from drifting while they rest, but in open water without kelp available, they face the problem of being moved apart by current and tide, while unconscious and therefore unable to correct for separation. The solution some otters have arrived at is to hold hands. Researchers who study sea otter behavior note that this hand-holding, paw-holding technically occurs most frequently between bonded pairs and between mothers and pups. It is not random social contact, it is specific. It is between those who have chosen each other or who belong to each other, reaching across the small space of open water to maintain the connection that sleep might otherwise break. There is something in this that needs no interpretation. Two creatures surrendering to rest, reaching for each other before they close their eyes, making sure that when the night moves them, it moves them together, making sure that the current, whatever it does not separate what has decided to remain close. Even in sleep, even unconscious, even in the dark, the hand reaches, the hand holds, and the water, gentle and indifferent, carries them both. There is something the brain does with the people it loves that it does not do with anyone else. It keeps them present even when they are absent. Neuroscientists studying the neural representation of close relationships have found that the mental image of a beloved person, the internal model the brain maintains of someone it is deeply attached to, activates many of the same regions as actual perception of that person. The brain, when imagining a loved one with sufficient vividness, does not entirely distinguish between the simulation and the reality. The same emotional circuits, the same attachment-related activity, the same subtle physiological responses that the actual presence of the beloved would produce. This is why thinking of someone you love can comfort you in a moment of stress, not because imagination is a pale substitute for presence, but because the brain's representation of the beloved is itself a real thing, an internal object that carries genuine neural weight, that exists in the mind's landscape as something more than an abstraction. You carry the people you love inside you in a way that is not only metaphorical. The brain has built them there carefully, from years of attention and experience, and the accumulated record of what they are like. They have neural addresses. They occupy actual mental space. When you are apart from someone you love, you are not entirely without them. A version of them, imperfect, incomplete, but real in its own neural way, remains, quietly present, available, held in the mind the way a photograph holds light, not the thing itself, but something genuine that the thing has left behind. In the early stage of love, the brain runs on dopamine. On the urgent clarifying electricity of wanting, the world narrows to one person. Sleep shortens, appetite shifts, the future rearranges itself around a single face. And then gradually something changes. The dopamine does not disappear, but a second neurochemical system begins to take precedence. Oxytocin, vasopressin, the chemistry not of wanting, but of being with, not of seeking, but of having found. The brain shifts slowly from the hot and consuming register of early love towards something that researchers describe as the attachment system, calmer, more stable, less spectacular, and more sustaining. Long-term couples who report deep satisfaction in their relationships show brain activity patterns in which both systems are present. The reward circuits still respond, to the beloved still show activity that suggests the partner remains genuinely, neurologically rewarding. But the urgent edge has softened into something more like warmth, more like the particular contentment of a thing that has settled into its rightful place. This transition from dopamine to oxytocin, from wanting to belonging, is sometimes experienced as loss, as if love has faded, as if the quieter thing that remains is less than what came before. But the brain disagrees. The quieter thing is different. It is deeper. It is more load-bearing. It is what holds when the electricity is gone and the ordinary days arrive, and two people discover whether what they have is strong enough to be unremarkable and still be enough. The fire that becomes warmth has not gone out. It has only learned how to last. There is an experiment you could conduct right now in this room, in this quiet. Think of someone whose voice you know well. Someone whose voice you could recognize from a single word, from a single syllable, from a laugh heard through a wall. Now imagine that voice saying your name. Researchers studying the physiological effects of loved ones' voices have found that simply hearing the voice of a trusted, closely bonded person, even over a telephone, even through a recording, produces measurable decreases in cortisol and measurable increases in oxytocin. The effect is strongest in person, but it persists through significant mediation. The voice, stripped of the face, stripped of touch and scent and physical presence, still carries enough of the person to trigger the body's recognition. Even now, the sound of that imagined voice, summoned only in the mind, never actually heard, may be doing something gentle in your nervous system, something small and real. The voice of someone you love is one of the most direct routes into the body's sense of safety that exists. It bypasses most of the mind's ordinary evaluation. It arrives somewhere older and more certain. It says, without words, in the specific frequency of someone who knows you, you are here and you are known and all is well. Some sounds carry more than sound. Some voices carry the whole person inside them. The ancient Greeks were in many ways more careful about love than we are. They refused to let a single word do all the work. They had at least 6 distinct words for what we compress into one. Eros, the consuming electric pull of desire. Philia, the deep, steady warmth of friendship and affection between equals. Storge, the instinctive, bone-deep love of family, of parent for child and child for parent. Pragma, the long, patient love that has survived enough time together to become something more like wisdom than feeling. Ludus, the playful, light love of early courtship, of teasing and laughing and not yet being serious. And Agape, the broadest, most selfless form, the love that extends beyond the personal into something closer to compassion for all living things. These were not considered variations of the same thing. They were considered genuinely different experiences, deserving different names, requiring different understanding, producing different obligations. What is quietly striking is that every person who has loved more than once, in more than one way, across more than one chapter of a life, already knows these distinctions from the inside. Already knows that what you feel for a lifelong friend is not lesser than what you feel for a lover, only different. Already knows that the love that has lasted 30 years is not the same creature as the love that arrived 3 months ago, only older. The Greeks simply decided that knowing the difference was worth the effort of naming it. When a person forgives, truly forgives, Not the performed version that leaves the wound intact beneath a polished surface, but the genuine neural event of releasing a held grievance. Something happens in the brain that researchers have been able to measure. The sustained stress response associated with holding a grievance, the background activation of threat-related circuits, the low-grade cortisol elevation that chronic resentment produces, begins to quiet. The prefrontal cortex, the region most associated with deliberate regulation of emotion, shows increased activity. The body's inflammatory markers, elevated by chronic interpersonal stress, begin to decline. Forgiveness in neuroscience is not a moral abstraction. It is a physiological event. It releases the body from a loop it was running, a threat assessment cycle that kept returning to the same wound, the same wrong, the same evidence of being harmed by someone it was also trying to love. And love, researchers have found, makes forgiveness measurably more accessible. Not because love excuses harm, but because the neural architecture of deep attachment, the reward circuits, the oxytocin pathways, the long history of positive association with a person, provides more resources for the difficult work of release. More reasons the brain can find to update its threat assessment. More weight on the side of the ledger that says this person is still despite this safe. Love does not make forgiveness easy. It makes it possible. And that difference in a long relationship may be everything. There is a moth small, unremarkable by daylight wings, the color of bark or shadow that navigates by moonlight, not by memory, not by landmark, by the moon itself. By maintaining a fixed, angular relationship to the light of a distant, ancient, constant thing, the moth holds its course through darkness with a precision that has served its kind for longer than human beings have existed. The moon is so far away that its light arrives for practical purposes in parallel rays, rays that do not converge, that do not shift with the moth's movement. A perfect fixed point. A reliable, unchanging reference in the dark. What strikes certain researchers, those who allow themselves the indulgence of wondering, is that longing operates something like this. That the people we love when absent function as fixed points in the interior landscape, reference objects around which the ordinary navigation of daily life quietly orients. The world feels different when that fixed point is missing, not just emotionally, directionally. The way a room feels altered when a familiar piece of furniture has been moved and the body keeps expecting it in the wrong place. Longing is the nervous system checking its reference point and finding only dark. Adjusting, checking again. The moth does not choose the moon. It simply finds, in the ancient architecture of its navigation, that the moon is what it steers by. Some things are chosen. Some things are simply what we have always moved toward, without ever deciding to, without ever being able to entirely explain why. There is a study in social psychology that placed participants in a room with either a warm cup of coffee or a cold one. Nothing else was different. The participants were then asked to evaluate the personality of a stranger, based only on a brief written description. Those holding the warm cup rated the stranger as warmer, more generous, more trustworthy. The finding has been replicated, extended, and refined across multiple research groups. Physical warmth, the simple sensory experience of something warm, held in the hand, or a warm room, or warm water, measurably increases the tendency to perceive others as socially warm. The brain regions associated with physical temperature overlap significantly with those associated with interpersonal warmth and trust. They share neural real estate. They share vocabulary. Researchers suggest this is not coincidence. The association between physical warmth and social safety is ancient as the first social mammals who huddled together for warmth, for whom the warmth of another body was literally the warmth of survival. The brain has never fully separated the two signals. It processes them in overlapping systems, translates one into the other with a casualness that bypasses conscious awareness entirely. This is why a warm drink on a difficult evening can feel in some small and wordless way like company. Why a cold, empty room can feel lonelier than the temperature alone would explain. Why the body has always understood something the mind takes longer to articulate. Warmth, in every form, tells the same ancient story. You are not alone. Something nearby is warm. Something nearby is safe. There is a mismatch at the center of human romantic experience that biologists find quietly fascinating, and that most people who have loved more than once have noticed without needing a study to confirm it. The lifespan of passionate romantic infatuation, that consuming dopamine-soaked world-narrowing early stage of love, appears to have a natural duration. Researchers studying relationship trajectories have found that the neurochemical intensity of early romantic love typically fades somewhere between 18 months and 3 years. The brain's reward circuits habituate to the stimulus of the beloved, the way they habituate to any repeated stimulus. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. The constantly remarkable becomes simply present. The human lifespan, meanwhile, extends across 8 or 9 decades for many people alive today. A single infatuation at its neurochemical peak occupies perhaps 2 to 3 of those decades' worth of years. The rest of a life is spent in the quieter country that lies beyond infatuation's borders. This mismatch is not a failure of love. It is an invitation to discover what love becomes when it is no longer running on its original fuel. What it looks like when the electricity settles into warmth. When the person who was once new has become instead familiar, which is a different thing entirely, and in many ways a more sustaining one. Familiar means, I know where you keep things. I know how you sound when you are worried before you say you are worried. I know this specifically and have chosen to stay anyway. That is not a lesser love. It is love that has learned its own geography. In a research setting designed to study the neural basis of human connection, participants are placed in brain scanners while engaging in a simple task. They listen, they speak, they genuinely pay attention to what another person is saying and respond with care, and their brains begin to change. Studies of neural coupling, the degree to which 2 brains show correlated activity during genuine communication, have found that when a person is truly listening to another, the activity patterns in the listener's brain begin to mirror those in the speaker's brain. Not identically, but significantly. The listener's neural response anticipates the speaker's meaning before the sentence is complete. The brain is not merely receiving information, it is reaching forward into it, modeling the other mind from the inside. Even now in this quiet, if you are listening to these words with some portion of genuine attention, if some part of you is following the thread rather than letting it pass, something is happening in your neural activity that would not happen if these words were simply noise. Your brain is doing something generous and ancient with the signal it is receiving. It is making room for another mind's movement inside its own. This is what listening actually is at the neural level. Not passivity, not reception, active, effortful, other-directed modeling, the mind reaching toward another mind and trying gently to know what it is like to be there. Listening done truly is one of the most intimate things one person can do for another, and the brain knows this. It responds accordingly. Deep in the ocean, in the cold and pressured dark of the seafloor, coral polyps build. Each one is tiny, a single organism, soft-bodied, without eyes, without a brain, without anything we would recognize as a nervous system capable of preference or choice. And yet they do not build alone, and they do not build randomly. Coral polyps are drawn together by chemical gradients in the water. They secrete substances that attract others. They build upon the structures of those that came before. Over years and decades and centuries, the accumulated work of billions of these minute, preferenceless creatures produces something vast: reef systems, stretching hundreds of miles of extraordinary complexity and beauty, visible from space. What makes a reef is not the intelligence of any single polyp. It is the sum of 10,000 small chemical attractions, each one pulling something small towards something else small, each one building on what previous attraction built, until the aggregate of all those pulls becomes something larger than any individual contributor could have imagined or intended. Love, in its largest sense, may work something like this. No single moment of tenderness is very large. No single act of care constructs much on its own, but accumulated over days, over years, over the ordinary and unremarkable repetition of choosing someone again in the small. daily ways that do not feel like choosing. Because they have become habit, the aggregate becomes something that was not planned, not imagined, not intended by any single moment. Something that grew, because it kept reaching quietly toward what was near. There is a moment in almost every long relationship when the person who was once new becomes instead known. When the face that was once remarkable has become simply the face. When the voice that once arrived like weather has become, instead, the sound of the house settling familiar ambient, noticed only in its absences. This transition has a reputation it does not deserve. Psychologists studying the arc of romantic relationships have found that the idealization common in early love, the tendency to perceive a new partner as more beautiful, more interesting, more extraordinary than any objective assessment would, confirm does fade. The brain, habituating to the beloved, adjusts its evaluation towards something more accurate, more honest, more proportional. What replaces idealization is not disillusionment in relationships that sustain. It is something quieter and more durable. Researchers call it acceptance, though that word understates it. It is the specific, hard-won knowledge of exactly who this person is, their genuine strengths and their real limitations, their humor and their difficulty, their particular way of being flawed held without the editing that infatuation performs. To be loved without idealization is in its way the deeper gift. To have someone know the accurate version of you, not the version you were in your most impressive moments, not the version that benefited from the generous distortion of early love, and choose that version. Stay with that version. Find that version finally enough. The veil lifts, and some things are more beautiful without it. Love does not stay only in the heart, or in the mind, or in the particular electrical weather of the nervous system during moments of tenderness or longing or reunion. Love goes into the immune system, into the hormonal environment, into the inflammatory pathways that govern how the body responds to stress and illness, and the ordinary cellular damage of being alive. Studies comparing immune markers in partnered and unpartnered individuals have found that the immune systems of long-term couples show mirrored patterns of change. Not identical, the immune system remains individual, shaped by each person's own history of exposure and response, but correlated, as if the sustained close biological proximity of two people sharing air, sharing touch, sharing the invisible chemical landscape of daily life together produces a gradual mutual adjustment in how each body defends itself. Some researchers describe this as co-regulation, others are more cautious about the language. But the finding keeps appearing. Two people who have loved each other for a long time are not biologically exactly the people they would have been had they not met. The immune system of each carries the faint imprint of the other's presence. The body has been changed at a cellular level by the sustained proximity of someone it recognized as safe. You are not the same body you were before you loved who you have loved. Not only in memory, not only in feeling, in the actual measurable biological interior of what you are. Love leaves its mark all the way down. In a hospital room, in a research setting, careful enough to control for distraction and expectation and the many variables that complicate pain studies, a person lies in a scanner. They are experiencing mild, calibrated, measurable pain. Then a photograph is placed where they can see it. The photograph is of someone they love. Within the window of the scan, the neural signatures of pain processing shift. The regions associated with suffering show reduced activity. Self-reported pain intensity decreases, not dramatically, not enough to replace medication or make the pain irrelevant, but measurably, consistently, in a pattern that has now been replicated across multiple research groups working independently. Even a photograph, even a two-dimensional image on a screen carrying no scent, no voice, no warmth. Even this simplified, stripped-down representation of a beloved person produces enough neural activation of attachment-related circuits to measurably alter how the brain processes harm. Think of what this means about what you carry with you. Every face you love held in memory is a resource the body can draw on. A real neurologically substantial thing that can change in moments of difficulty how the world feels from the inside. Not imagined comfort. Actual modulation of the pain signal. Actual chemistry shifted by a face. You are not alone in your pain, even when you are alone in your room. The people you love are in there with you, in the only place that ultimately matters. They are in the way the brain responds to the world. The honeybee does not live long. A worker bee in summer, flying, foraging, dancing, carrying pollen and information through the warm air of her brief season, lives perhaps 6 weeks. 6 weeks of extraordinary industry of navigating by sun and landmark, and the magnetic field of the earth of communicating through movement, of sustaining a colony that will outlast her by years. And at the end of that season, if the hive is threatened, she will sting, knowing in whatever way a bee can be said to know anything that the act will kill her. The stinger lodges, the venom sac tears free. The bee flies away and does not fly far before it falls. Biologists are careful about the language here. The honeybee does not reason about sacrifice. It does not weigh its life against the hive's survival in any deliberate way. The behavior is encoded ancient, shaped by millions of years of selection for exactly this outcome. The bee does not choose, it responds. And yet, the outcome of that response is that a small creature gives the only thing it has its remaining weeks of summer for the protection of something larger than itself, for the warmth and continuity of a community that contains among its many thousand members its own offspring, its own particular contribution to the next season. There is no love in the bee, in the way we mean the word, but there is something in the behavior that love at its most protective and most costly has always resembled. The giving of what cannot be recovered for the sake of what must be preserved, across every culture, across every century of recorded human experience, across the testimony of poets and farmers and scientists and children and the very old who have outlived everyone they started with. The moment of recognizing love, the moment when what exists between two people crosses from uncertainty into knowledge, is almost never what anyone imagined it would be. It is rarely dramatic. It is rarely announced by music or weather, or any of the signals that stories have taught us to expect. It is more often something small, something unremarkable in itself. A particular afternoon, an ordinary sentence said in an ordinary way. A laugh at nothing important, a look across a room that lasted a half-second too long and in that half-second said everything. Researchers studying retrospective accounts of falling in love have found that people most frequently report recognizing love not in moments of peak intensity, but in moments of ordinary quiet, in the space between doing something and saying something, in the noticing of a small detail, the way someone holds a cup, the way they look out a window, and feeling something certain settle in the chest. The moment does not announce itself. It simply arrives, quietly, often disguised as nothing in particular. And the person looking back will say it was then, in that small, unhurried moment. That was when I knew. Love's most important arrivals come in through the side door. Long before any of us had words for what we needed, before we had formed the first conscious preference or fear or hope, something was already being decided about how we would love. In the first months and years of life, in the particular quality of care received from whoever was present and responsible, the nervous system was assembling a template. Researchers call it an attachment style, a set of implicit expectations about whether others can be trusted, whether closeness is safe, whether love is something that reliably arrives when called for, or something that comes and goes without pattern or warning. John Bowlby, the psychiatrist who first mapped this territory, found that the attachment patterns formed in infancy cast long shadows. Not permanent shadows. Attachment styles can shift across a lifetime, through new relationships, through therapy, through the slow and often difficult work of having enough different experiences to update the original template. But they cast shadows nonetheless. The person who learned early that love was reliable tends to move toward closeness without excessive fear. The person who learned that love was inconsistent may want closeness urgently while simultaneously fearing it. The person who learned that needing love produced pain may have learned to need it quietly or secretly, or not at all. None of these patterns is a flaw. They are all adaptations, intelligent, well-reasoned responses to the specific environment in which a nervous system formed. The nervous system did exactly what nervous systems do. It learned from what happened and it built accordingly. What was built can be rebuilt. That is the other thing the research keeps finding. Love received differently over enough time gradually teaches the nervous system a new expectation. The template is not permanent. It is simply the place the building began. The human body is at its most fundamental level a social organism, not in the pleasant sense only, in the biological sense. In the sense that its regulatory systems, the ones that govern heart rate, cortisol levels, immune function, inflammatory response, sleep architecture, were shaped by millions of years of existing in groups and function optimally in the presence of other trusted bodies. Alone, the nervous system works harder. It maintains a higher baseline vigilance. The threat detection systems stay more active. Sleep is lighter. Inflammatory markers run higher. The body without social input it has assessed as safe defaults to a state of mild but sustained readiness, just in case. In the presence of a trusted person, not just anyone but someone the nervous system has specifically categorized as safe, and known this baseline readiness relaxes. The threat detection systems quiet, sleep deepens, cortisol drops. The body, recognizing that it is not alone, redistributes the resources it was spending on vigilance toward repair, toward restoration, toward the internal housekeeping that only happens fully when the guard is down. We say that people make us feel safe. This is more literal than it sounds. They are changing the operating parameters of the body. They are telling the nervous system through their specific, known, trusted presence that the environment has been assessed and found to contain no immediate danger. Safety is not a feeling, it is a physiological state. And the fastest way into it is another person who knows your name. Among all the stars visible from Earth, among the thousands that can be seen on a clear night and the billions more that cannot, a significant portion are not single suns at all. They are pairs, binary star systems in which two stars orbit each other around a shared center of gravity are extraordinarily common. Some estimates suggest that more than half of all stars in the Milky Way exist in multiple star systems, many of them binaries. These paired stars have been in each other's gravitational company for billions of years. They formed together, in the same collapsing cloud of gas and dust, and they've been circling each other ever since, each one shaping the orbit of the other, each one affecting the other's light, each one held in place by the specific pull of what it has, always being moving around. When you look up at a night sky and see what appears to be a single point of light, there is a real possibility that you are seeing two stars so close from this distance that human eyes cannot separate them. Two separate suns, each with their own heat and light, and history appearing from here as one. Astronomers studying binary systems have found that the two stars in a close pair gradually influence each other's structure over billions of years. The gravity of one shapes the outer layers of the other. In some systems, material actually flows between them. Two things kept close enough for long enough begin to change each other at the level of what they are made of. This, it seems, is not only true of stars. There is a region of the brain that processes social pain, the pain of rejection, of exclusion, of being told that you are not wanted or valued or included. This region is called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, and it is, as researchers discovered with some surprise, the same region that processes physical pain. Not similar, not adjacent, overlapping. The neural signature of being rejected by someone you care about recruits the same circuitry as the neural signature of a hand placed on something too hot. The brain does not maintain a clean separation between social harm and physical harm. It processes both as threats to the organism. It responds to both with the same ancient alarm. This is why social rejection hurts in the body, not just in the mind. Why the experience of being excluded from a group, dismissed by someone you admire, or turned away by someone you love, produces a physical sensation, a tightening, a hollowness, something in the chest or the stomach that is not metaphorical but genuinely somatic. The body is not being dramatic when it aches from rejection. It is being accurate. It is reporting a genuine threat assessment. It is saying in the only language the ancient systems have, something that matters for survival has gone wrong. And what is the remedy that works? The same research keeps finding the same answer. The presence of someone who accepts you. The particular neural medicine of feeling wanted by a specific known trusted person. The wound and the cure are made of the same thing. There is a study that followed children from birth across the first years of their lives. It measured many things: cognitive development, physical health, stress response, emotional regulation, and among its most consistent findings was something that sounds simple but turns out to be anything but. Children who are held often develop differently from children who are not. Specifically, the stress regulation systems of children who receive frequent, responsive physical contact, who are held when distressed, touched with warmth and regularity, made to feel that the body is a safe and welcome thing, develop with greater resilience. Their cortisol responses to stress are more measured. Their recovery from upset is faster. Their capacity to self-soothe in later childhood is greater. The skin, it turns out, is not just a boundary. It is a channel. Through it, in the earliest years, information flows about the safety of the world, the reliability of care, the fundamental question that every nervous system is trying to answer from its first moment. Is this a place where I can rest, or must I stay ready? Touch answers that question before language can. Before memory as we know it can record the answer. Before the child has any way of knowing what is being decided about how it will feel to be alive. The held child does not remember being held, but the body does. The nervous system carries that early answer forward into every room it will ever stand in. Every held child is being told in the only language available: you are safe here. You are welcome. The world contains comfort. There is a signal that love sends before almost any other. Quieter than a declaration. Earlier than a touch. It arrives before either person has admitted anything, before the word love has been considered, or the feeling has been given any name at all. The desire to share good news with a specific person. Something happens, something small or something significant, something that produces a flicker of joy or relief or satisfaction. And before the feeling has fully formed, before the mind has finished processing what occurred, it has already moved toward a particular face. Not toward everyone, not toward the nearest available ear, toward one specific person. The person whose response to the news already matters more than the news itself. Psychologists studying the early markers of attachment have found this impulse, what they call capitalization, the desire to share positive events with a specific other, to be one of the most reliable early indicators that a bond is forming. More reliable in some studies than physical attraction alone. More reliable than shared interests or compatible personalities. Because what it reveals is not chemistry, it is orientation. The mind has begun to organize itself around another person, has begun quietly without instruction to treat that person as the natural destination of experience, as the place where things that happen become finally real because they have been witnessed by the right eyes. The sharing of good news is not a small thing. It is the mind saying, I have started to live, at least in part, toward you. I am building a world in which you are the person who hears what happens first. That is not infatuation. That is the beginning of something that lasts. Every autumn across North America, something sets out on a journey so long and so precisely navigated that scientists spent decades trying to understand how it was possible. The monarch butterfly, small enough to rest on a fingertip, weighing less than a paperclip, flies up to 3,000 miles from its summer breeding grounds to a specific forest in the mountains of central Mexico. Not a general region, not a general direction. The same trees year after year, generation after generation. In a forest the individual butterfly has never visited and whose location it has never been taught. It navigates using a combination of the sun's position, an internal circadian clock that adjusts for the sun's movement across the sky, and sensitivity to the Earth's magnetic field. It has a map written into it at a level below, learning below memory, below anything we would recognize as knowledge. What is most quietly remarkable is that the butterfly making this journey is not the butterfly that made it last year. It is the great-grandchild or the great-great-grandchild of the one that returned the previous spring. The knowledge of where to go, the fidelity to that specific destination persists across generations of creatures who never directly learned it. Something in the monarch carries a loyalty to a place it has never seen, a faithfulness encoded not in memory, but in the body itself. Love at its most enduring works something like this, not always as feeling, sometimes as orientation, as the body simply knowing, without being able to explain which direction is home. In a research facility studying animal cognition, a lovebird is separated from its partner. The separation is brief, controlled, humane, designed only for observation, not for harm. But within a short time, measurable changes appear. The bird's behavior shifts. It moves less. It vocalizes in patterns that differ from its ordinary calls, lower, less frequent, directed toward the space where the partner was. It shows reduced interest in food. Its activity level drops. If the separation continues, researchers have documented weight loss and behavioral indicators that, in a human context, we would not hesitate to call depression. When the partner is returned, the changes reverse. The bird's behavior normalizes. Its appetite returns. Its calls change register. Lovebirds are not unique in showing this pattern. Similar responses have been documented in pigeons, in certain parrots, in several species of crow. The specific individual partner, it turns out, is not interchangeable with any other member of the species. The bond is not to a type or a category or a role. It is to this one, this particular, irreplaceable one whose absence changes the quality of the entire world. Scientists debate how much inner experience lies behind the behavior. They are careful correctly about projecting human feeling onto minds that may work very differently. But the behavior keeps appearing across species, across research groups, across every attempt to explain it as something simpler than it looks. Something in these animals knows the difference between the world with their person in it and the world without, and it prefers clearly and measurably the world with. There is a finding that arrives quietly in the literature on long-term relationships, not in the dramatic studies of early love, not in the neuroimaging of infatuation, but in the slower, gentler research on what it is like to have loved someone across decades. People in long, close marriages frequently report something that sounds at first like a loss of self, but on closer examination, it is revealed to be something different entirely. They report that the person they love has become part of how they understand themselves. Not that they have lost their individuality, not that they cannot function independently, but that the internal narrative through which they make sense of who they are now includes the partner as a constitutive element. The memory of who they were before is still accessible, but the self that exists now was partly built by this relationship, shaped by this person's way of seeing them, formed in ways both deliberate and invisible by decades of being known by someone who stayed. Psychologists call this self-expansion, the phenomenon by which close relationships literally expand the contents of what a person considers to be themselves. New perspectives acquired from the partner, new competencies developed through shared life, new memories that belong to neither person alone, but to the particular entity that two people in love become together. You have been shaped by everyone who has truly loved you, not diminished, expanded, made more than you would have been alone. The people who have known you most deeply are in some quiet and permanent way inside you still. There is a reason why in moments of genuine fear, the presence of a specific trusted person changes everything. Not a generic companion, not a friendly stranger, a known, trusted, specifically chosen person. In studies measuring threat response, placing participants in mildly stressful situations, and varying the social conditions under which they experience the stress, researchers have found that the presence of a trusted person does not simply provide distraction or comfort in the ordinary sense. It changes the brain's threat assessment itself. The amygdala, that ancient rapid-fire alarm system, shows measurably reduced activation when a trusted person is nearby. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which governs the cortisol stress response, damps down. The prefrontal cortex, the region most capable of nuanced evaluation and calm judgment, becomes more active relative to the alarm systems. The world processed through a brain that knows a trusted person is near is assessed as less threatening. Not because the threat has changed, because the resource assessment has changed. The brain registering the presence of a known ally recalculates. It determines that the current situation, whatever its challenges, is one that does not require full emergency response, one that can be navigated, one that with this person nearby is manageable. This is what it means to feel safe with someone, not the absence of difficulty. The presence of a person whose existence in your vicinity tells the oldest part of your brain you are not facing this alone. You have backup. You have been here before and made it through, and the person beside you has always been part of how. The world genuinely is a different place when the right person is in it with you. There is something about a whisper that changes the quality of what is said inside it, not the content. The content can be anything, a question, a piece of news, a name, something entirely ordinary. But when it arrives in a whisper, it carries a different weight, a different intimacy. Something in the reduced volume signals to the listener's nervous system that what is being said is meant specifically for them, that the speaker has narrowed the broadcast, has chosen this ear and not the room. Researchers studying vocal intimacy across cultures have found that whispering consistently registers as more intimate than speech at normal volume, not because of what is said, but because of what the reduction in volume implies. It implies proximity. It implies trust. It implies that the speaker has made themselves deliberately vulnerable by closing the distance and softening the voice, offering something that could not reach beyond the two of them, even if it tried. In close relationships, whispering carries an additional layer. It activates the memory of other whispers, of other moments when the voice dropped and the face came close and something was said that was only ever meant for one person. The nervous system recognizes the register. It responds to it not just in the present moment, but through the accumulated weight of every previous time. That softening of the voice meant, this is between us. This is something private. This is for you. Some of the most important things ever said between two people were said quietly, almost inaudibly, in the particular careful register that says, I trust you with the small voice. I trust you with the version of me that does not need to fill the room. There is a way of staying in touch with someone you love that research has found to be surprisingly powerful, not because it is elaborate or effortful or requires presence, but because it requires the opposite of presence. Writing a letter. Studies examining the neural effects of composing written communication directed at a specific loved person have found that the act of writing the slow, deliberate word-by-word construction of something meant for a particular reader activates many of the same attachment-related brain regions as actually being with that person. The imagination of the reader, sustained across the writing process, produces something neurologically similar to the imagination of shared presence. Writing a letter to someone you love is, in a neurologically meaningful sense, a way of being with them. The mind directed toward that specific person with attention and care enters something like the state it enters in their presence, more slowly, more deliberately, with more explicit attention to what is actually being felt and meant because writing demands that it be put into words. This may be why letters have always felt different from other forms of communication, why they are saved, reread, kept in boxes long after the relationship that produced them has changed form. Not because the information they contain is irreplaceable, but because something of the writer's actual presence was deposited in them, some quality of sustained, directed attention that the reader, opening the page, can somehow still feel. A letter is not a substitute for being there. It is a different kind of being there, slower, more careful, made entirely of the deliberate choosing of words for someone specific, which is itself a form of love. Among the longest-lived animals on Earth, there is a pattern that researchers have noticed, but struggled to fully explain. The Aldabra giant tortoise lives for over a century, often well beyond it. The Greenland shark, discovered only recently to reach ages of several hundred years, moves through the cold dark of the Northern Ocean at a pace so slow it seems barely to move at all. Certain koi kept in Japanese garden ponds have been documented living past 200 years, gliding through the same clear water in the same careful, unhurried way across generations of human caretakers. What these long-lived creatures share beyond their longevity is something about their relationship to their environment. They tend toward consistency. They inhabit stable, familiar, low-stress conditions. They do not burn their energy in sudden dramatic bursts. They move slowly through water or land that has become, over decades, utterly known to them. Biologists are careful about the interpretation. Longevity is complex, governed by genetics and metabolism, and factors that have nothing to do with environment or stress. But the correlation keeps appearing. The longest lives tend to be lived in conditions of sustained calm, of familiar, reliable, unhurried consistency. The tortoise has not cracked the secret of love, but it may have cracked something adjacent to it, something about what the body does when it has found a place it can trust, when it no longer spends its resources on readiness and vigilance, when it is simply finally allowed to be exactly where it is. Some things live longest in the conditions that most resemble being at peace. In the long literature of what people report as the peak experiences of their lives, the moments that stand out across decades of living as somehow more real, more vivid, more essentially meaningful than the surrounding hours, researchers have found a cluster of experiences that appear again and again, regardless of culture, age, or circumstance. Among them, consistently near the top, the feeling of being truly seen by another person, not admired, not desired, not evaluated favorably. Seen. The specific, rare, profoundly settling experience of being in the presence of someone who is perceiving you accurately, who is not projecting, not editing, not seeing the version of you that is easiest or most convenient or most flattering, but actually attending to who you are. The experience of being known without performance, without pretense, in the quiet and slightly vulnerable reality of your actual self. Perhaps you have felt this. Perhaps you know from the inside the particular quality of a conversation or a moment in which someone looked at you and you felt, without any particular drama, that you did not need to explain or manage or perform, that you could simply be what you were and that it would be enough, that it was for this person genuinely interesting rather than insufficient. This experience, so simple in its description, so rare in practice, is reported as one of the most nourishing things one human being can offer another. More sustaining, many say, than compliment, more restoring than praise, more fundamentally comforting than almost anything else. To be truly seen is to be loved in the most essential way. It is the love that makes you feel, finally and without effort, that you are enough exactly as you are. In neuroscience, love does not live in the heart. It lives in the brain. In the ventral tegmental area, the nucleus accumbens, the anterior cingulate cortex, the insula, the hypothalamus. In overlapping networks of dopamine and oxytocin and vasopressin. In the ancient subcortical structures and the newer cortical ones. In the connections between them that light up in particular and characteristic ways when the mind encounters the person it has decided to love. The heart, strictly speaking, is a pump, extraordinary in its engineering, reliable in its rhythm, essential in every possible way, but not technically the place where love is processed, stored, or generated. And yet, the heart was not entirely wrong to claim the territory, because the heart does respond to love. It accelerates in the presence of the beloved. It synchronizes across time with the heart of the person beside it. It physically aches under sufficient loss in ways that emergency rooms take seriously. It carries in its rhythm the record of every person who has ever altered it. The poets intuited something real. The scientists have simply located it more precisely. And in locating it precisely, they have not diminished it. They have found that love is not a metaphor running on borrowed biology. It is biology. Actual, measurable, reproducible, and more complex than any single poem has ever fully captured. The heart was never wrong about love. It was just pointing one organ to the left of where the story was being written. There is a color in the sky that has no precise name in most languages. It arrives in the 20 minutes after sunset, when the light has gone, but the dark has not yet fully settled. A blue that is not quite blue. A gray that is not quite gray. Something between them, cool and soft, and neither one thing nor the other, belonging to the transitional moment between what was and what is coming. Photographers call it the blue hour. Painters have tried to capture it for centuries, and always found it slightly beyond reach. And researchers studying emotional response to light and color have found something interesting about this particular quality of illumination. People exposed to images taken in this light, or simply sitting outside in it, show measurable increases in what psychologists call tender effect. Not sadness exactly, not joy, something in between, a wistful, quietly open emotional state that most people ask to describe it. Reach for words like longing or soft, or the particular feeling of something beautiful that will not last. Some researchers connect this to the way transition itself affects the nervous system. The liminal moment, the space between states, when one thing has ended and another has not yet begun, produces a particular quality of awareness, a heightened noticing, a temporary suspension of ordinary forward motion that allows something more contemplative to surface. It is in these between moments that people most often think of those they love, in the transition between waking and sleep, between one year and the next, between the end of something and whatever comes after. The heart turns toward the beloved in threshold moments, as if love is what the mind reaches for when ordinary time briefly pauses. The blue hour belongs to tenderness. It always has. Human babies arrive earlier than the young of almost any other primate. A newborn foal can stand within hours. A newborn chimpanzee can cling to its mother almost immediately. But a human infant born at 9 months is neurologically and physically incomplete in ways that would be considered premature in our closest relatives. The brain at birth is only about a quarter of its adult size. The skull plates have not fused. The infant cannot regulate its own temperature, cannot feed itself, cannot move purposefully, cannot survive without sustained and total care for years. This early arrival is a consequence of evolution's competing pressures. The human brain grew too large for the pelvis that bipedal walking required. Something had to give. What gave was gestation length. Human babies are born early, which means they must complete a significant portion of their development outside the womb, in the world in arms, in the sustained presence of caregivers who provide the warmth and stimulation and safety that the womb previously guaranteed. The result is that the human infant requires more devoted, more prolonged, more attentive care than the young of almost any other species. Not weeks, years. Years of holding and feeding and watching and responding. This is not a design flaw. It may be the origin of human love in its most elaborate form. The prolonged helplessness of human infancy required caregivers capable of sustained, unconditional devotion. And the capacity for that devotion, once developed in the service of offspring, became available for everything else. For partners, for friends, for strangers. We are capable of love at such depth because we needed it so completely for so long at the very beginning. When something frightening happens, when the nervous system floods with cortisol and adrenaline, when the threat detection systems activate and the world narrows to the source of danger, there is a well-documented phenomenon in which articulating the experience reduces its intensity. Affect labeling, researchers call it. The simple act of naming what is being felt, saying internally or aloud, "I am afraid, I am sad, I feel overwhelmed," produces measurable decreases in amygdala activation. The alarm quiets. Not because the threat has changed, because the prefrontal cortex engaged by the act of naming asserts regulatory influence over the alarm system. Language, it seems, gives the mind a handle on what was previously only weather. But the effect is significantly amplified when the naming happens in the presence of someone who is listening. To say "I am afraid" to someone who hears it, really hears it, without dismissal, without the urgency to fix it, without turning away, produces more than the ordinary labeling effect. It produces the physiological benefits of being witnessed. The nervous system, registered as not alone in its fear, down-regulates further. The cortisol drops more steeply. The sense of manageability increases more substantially. What this means is that a person who simply listens, who sits with you in the feeling without rushing it toward resolution, is doing something genuinely therapeutic to your nervous system. Not through technique, not through expertise, simply through the quality of their presence, their willingness to stay in the room with what is hard. The oldest medicine, it turns out, is someone who does not leave when the feeling arrives. Somewhere in a mountain range, in a narrow valley, where the land rises steeply on both sides, two rivers meet. They do not immediately become one. Where rivers with different sediment loads, different temperatures, or different chemical compositions converge, they can flow side by side for extraordinary distances before mixing. The Mississippi and Ohio rivers flow in visible parallel for miles past. Their confluence, one darker, one lighter, each holding its character, each maintaining its identity in the same channel, before the friction of their shared journey gradually draws them into each other, until neither can be found separately anymore. This is not failure of merging. It is merging at the pace that merging takes, the honest rate, the rate that does not rush past the reality of two distinct things occupying the same space before they have had time to truly become one. Love between two people who have genuinely lived their own lives before finding each other often works this way. Two separate currents, each shaped by different landscapes, each carrying different histories in different colors, moving in the same direction, flowing close enough to touch, maintaining for a long time the distinct character of what each one was before, and gradually, at the pace that is honest and real, and cannot be hurried without losing something, becoming something. Neither of them was alone. The rivers do not fail by flowing parallel. They are simply being accurate about how long becoming one actually takes. Some things merge slowly, and what is made by slow merging tends to be very difficult to separate again. There is a quality that researchers who study love return to again and again. It appears in the data from relationship studies, in the testimony of couples who have stayed together across decades, in the philosophy of care and the neuroscience of bonding. It is not passion. It is not compatibility. It is not even trust, though trust is close. It is the quality of being given without diminishing. Every other resource the human being possesses is governed by scarcity. Time spent here cannot be spent there. Attention directed toward one thing is attention withdrawn from another. Energy given away is energy no longer available to the giver. Love, researchers and philosophers alike keep noting, does not appear to follow this rule. The love extended to a second child does not reduce the love available for the first. The love felt for a close friend does not consume the reserve available for a partner. The love poured into care for an aging parent does not leave the giver emptier than before. Or not only that, often, alongside the tiredness, something is also replenished. This is not universal. Love that is chronic and unreciprocated love, that is extracted rather than freely given, love under conditions of sustained trauma, these can exhaust. Love is not without cost, but love given freely within conditions of reciprocity and genuine care does something that other forms of giving do not always do. It tends to return. It tends, against the ordinary economics of human resources, to renew itself in the giving, to arrive back larger than it left. The heart, it seems, is not a fixed reservoir. It is something more like a spring, and springs do not run dry from being drawn upon. They run dry only from being left unused. On a clear night, if you were to step outside and look up, really look past the familiar constellations and into the deeper dark between them, the light reaching your eyes would have left its source before any of this existed. Before this conversation, before this century, before the written word, before the first city, before the first fire deliberately made and tended through a night that was otherwise entirely dark. The light from distant stars travels for so long, across such unimaginable distances, that what arrives at the eye is not a present thing, but a past one, a record, a message sent from somewhere that may no longer look the way it looked when the message was composed. And human love, the capacity to feel it, the specific neural architecture that makes it possible, is older than all of this. Older than language. Older than the first love poem pressed into clay. Older than the first name spoken in the voice of someone who meant it. The capacity to love is written into the biology of a species that has been shaped by it for hundreds of thousands of years. In the slow, patient grammar of survival and selection, and the long accumulation of what worked, you look up at light that is ancient, and you look with eyes that are ancient too. Eyes built by a lineage of creatures who survived in part because they were capable of caring specifically and deeply for particular others, who made it through the cold and the dark and the long uncertainty of being alive because they reached toward each other and held on. The light is old, and so is what you feel when you look at someone you love. You are both in that moment, something that has been traveling toward this for a very long time. You are made of atoms, forged in the cores of stars that died before the sun existed. Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, iron, the elements of which every human body is composed, were synthesized in stellar interiors across billions of years, scattered across space in the violence of supernovae, gathered by gravity into new formations, into planets, into oceans, into the slow chemical experiments that eventually produced something capable of looking back at the stars and wondering about them. And so is every person you have ever loved. The person whose hand you have held. The person whose voice you know by its specific weight in a room. The person whose absence has a particular shape in your daily hours. The person who told you something once that changed how you understood yourself and has been living in you ever since. Every one of them is made of the same ancient, exploded, impossibly traveled material as you. You are not strangers who happen to meet. You are the same old light arranged differently. The same stardust finding itself briefly in two separate forms close enough to touch. Love is not reaching across a distance between two different things. It is the universe recognizing itself in the particular face of this specific person, in the specific quality of this exact voice, in the unrepeatable texture of this one relationship between these two arrangements of ancient matter for this brief, luminous stretch of time. When you love someone, something very old is remembering itself. Something that has been traveling since before there was anywhere to go is for a moment home. There is a silence that exists between two people who love each other that is different from every other kind of silence. Not the silence of strangers, which carries the faint weight of things unsaid, of the social work of not speaking. Not the silence of conflict, which is dense with what has been decided not to say. Not even the silence of a person alone, which has its own particular quality of interior weather. The silence between two people who love each other and are comfortable in each other's presence is something the nervous system recognizes immediately and responds to as one of the safest conditions available. No performance required, no management of impression, no monitoring of how the silence is being received. Simply two bodies in the same space breathing the same air, each one known to the other well enough that the absence of words carries no threat. Researchers studying relationship quality have found that the capacity for comfortable shared silence, what they sometimes call companionable silence, is one of the most reliable markers of genuine deep attachment. It requires a level of mutual trust that performance cannot fake. It requires the specific confidence of knowing that you do not need to fill the space between you, because the space between you is already full of something that words would only interrupt. Every long and loving relationship accumulates these silences, deposits them like sediment. The morning silences, the evening ones, the silences in transit in waiting rooms, on long drives where the road is doing all the talking. Each one is its own small act of trust, its own confirmation that what exists between two people does not require constant maintenance, that it is stable enough to rest in, that it holds. Somewhere tonight in some city or village or quiet house far from here, two people are asleep beside each other. Perhaps they have been sleeping beside each other for 40 years, perhaps for 4 months. Perhaps they are not yet certain what they are to each other, only that the presence of this person makes the night feel different from the night before this person existed in their life. They are asleep. Their breathing has found a common rhythm. Their cortisol is low. Their nervous systems, each one has registered the other as safe, as known, and released for these hours the vigilance that the waking world requires. They are not aware of any of this. They are not thinking about neurochemistry or evolutionary biology or the ancient cross-cultural universality of what they are doing. They are simply asleep beside someone they love in the oldest and most ordinary human arrangement there is. And the world is quieter for it, not metaphorically. The world in which two people have found each other and chosen to rest in each other's presence is in some small and genuine way less troubled than it would otherwise be. One less person lying awake in the dark alone. One less nervous system spending the night at full alert. Two bodies doing what bodies were shaped across the long history of this species to do in the presence of safety. It is not a grand thing. It is not visible from space, but it is real, and it is ancient, and it is happening right now in more places than you could count all across the quiet dark of the world. And now here, at the end of all of this, at the end of 100 gentle wanderings through what love is, and what it does, and what it has always been, there is one more thing. Something that is not a fact. Something that does not come from a study or a scan or a clay tablet or the observation of animals in the field. Only this. You are held right now by more than you can see. By the people who have loved you and left their mark in how you move through the world. By the nervous system that carries forward every moment of being held, every voice that said your name with care, every hand that stayed when it could have left. By the ancient biological capacity for love that your lineage has been refining patiently for longer than language has existed. You are the current expression of something that has always reached toward connection. Something that formed pair bonds before it had words for them, that grieved, before it could name grief, that recognized the face of the beloved, before it had a word for beloved. You are part of the longest love story there is. Not a particular love story with a particular person, though those are real and those matter. The older one, the species-length one, the one that has been finding its way toward warmth and safety, and the specific face of the specific one across every dark and every cold and every distance. For as long as there have been hearts capable of the reaching, that story is not finished. It is happening now, in you, in whoever is near you, in the quiet that surrounds you as these words grow slower and the night settles more completely around the edges of wherever you are. Let the breath come slowly now. There is nothing required of you in this moment. No decision to make, no distance left to travel. The body knows what to do with stillness. It has always known, it simply needs to be given the room. Notice, if you can, the weight of yourself where you are lying, the particular warmth of the surface beneath you, the way the air feels as it enters, quiet, unhurried, carrying nothing that needs to be held onto. Somewhere in your body right now, oxytocin is moving. Cortisol is low or growing lower. The ancient regulatory systems of a nervous system that has found its conditions for rest are doing their slow, careful, largely invisible work. You do not have to help them. You only have to stay still and let them. The heart is beating, steadily, as it has been beating since before you were born, in a rhythm that has never needed your attention to continue. 70 times a minute, more or less. 100,000 times a day. The most reliable thing you contain. Still here. Still keeping time. Think if it comes easily of someone you love. Not with any urgency. Not with longing or grief, or any of the complicated weather that love sometimes brings. Simply let their face be present for a moment, the specific, unrepeatable face of a specific, irreplaceable person. Let the nervous system do what it does with that face. Let the chemistry shift quietly in the direction of warmth. You carry them with you into sleep, as you have always carried them, as they carry you. Outside right now, the stars are moving in their slow, ancient arcs. Binary suns are circling each other across distances so vast that light takes years to cross them, and still they circle. In the forests, the fungal networks are passing something between the roots of trees that stood here before your grandparents were born. In the ocean, something is singing in the dark. In a meadow somewhere, two fireflies are blinking in time. And somewhere, in more places than you could count, two people are asleep beside each other, breathing in the slow rhythm that bodies find when they are finally completely allowed to rest. The world is very old, and it is full tonight of love, in more forms than any language has yet found words for. In the hand that holds across open water, in the voice that drops to almost nothing because it trusts that you are close enough to hear, in the 20-second embrace, in the name spoken by someone who means it, in the ordinary Tuesday evening when nothing particular happens and someone is simply there, and that is enough, and it has always been enough. You are part of all of this. You have always been part of all of this. Let the night be gentle with you now. Let it carry what you have been holding. Let the breath come slower. Let the thoughts grow soft and loose, and begin to drift the way thoughts do when sleep is very near. Not quite formed, not quite gone somewhere, in the warm middle distance, where the mind finally stops trying to hold everything together, simply floats. You are safe here. You are known. You are held by more than you can see and more than you will remember in the morning, and that is perfectly, completely, quietly all right. Sleep is coming. Let it come. Let the last thing you feel tonight be something like warmth, something like belonging, something that has no name in any language but that every human body has always recognized. The ancient thing, the reaching thing, the thing that found you and stays. I hope you sleep well and dream softly. Good night.